Chapter 39-25. Swoosh! Swoosh! Nearly 1,000 Sir God experts had been recuperating in the divine battleship, waiting to attack Qiming planet. After flying out of the divine battleship, they saw an unfamiliar planet in front of them. But they were well trained. After being stunned for a moment, they quickly formed a battle formation under the command of the general. The battle formation was 1,000 miles wide and in the shape of a hexagram. It surrounded Ji Tianqing. Every Sir God of a foreign race held a divine weapon and stared at Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. Divine power surged all over their bodies. The 5 injured godly kings stood in the sky above the battle formation. After circulating their powers to suppress their injuries, they led the Sir God experts to attack. In their minds, no matter how strong Ji Tianqing was, he was destined to be killed by them. After all, they had 5 godly kings and nearly 1,000 Sir God experts. It was enough to conquer a planet. How could they not kill a godly king of a foreign race? Kill! Kill this bastard of a foreign race! Tear him into pieces! Shouts of killing erupted from the crowd. The 5 godly kings attacked from different directions at the same time. Nearly 1,000 Sir Gods joined forces to cast spells and release divine powers that could destroy heaven and earth. They exploded with wild and unparalleled power. Everything within 1,000 miles was drowned by the radiance of swords and divine powers. However, Ji Tianqing didn't even use the Sword of Burial of Heaven to deal with these foreign race experts. He only used his fists and legs to launch a few divine powers and ultimate skills to launch a counterattack. Bam! 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 Thousands of radiances of swords and divine powers of various shapes bombarded him, but it was like scratching an itch. He was enveloped in a layer of faint golden light that blocked all the attacks. These godly kings and Sir Gods of foreign races couldn't break his defense at all. But the dragon elephant divine fist that he used and the sword radiances that filled the sky shattered the bodies of the 5 godly kings, turning them into pieces that filled the sky. Hundreds of sword flashes that carried the divine power of 200 laws were scattered in the crowd, killing the divine lords of the foreign races. With a series of dull thuds, at least 700 Sir Gods were instantly killed and turned into dust. The dazzling divine light flickered for a long time before gradually disappearing. At this moment, there were still more than 200 Sir Gods alive. They were all injured to varying degrees. The 5 foreign race god kings had their divine bodies destroyed. It was a tragic sight. The godheads of the 4 middle-level divine kings were also shattered, and they died on the spot. The great general's godhead was still there, and he was lucky enough to keep his life. He was filled with fear, anxiety, and regret. Damn it! How could this guy be so powerful? I was careless. Ji Tianqing's strength had far exceeded his expectations. He now understood that he and these Sir Gods were not enough for Ji Tianqing to slaughter. Today, he had bumped into a tough nut to crack. He was definitely going to die here. However, he was unwilling to resign himself to fate. He refused to sit and wait for death. As he roared, he ordered the 200 or so divine lords to continue attacking Ji Tianqing. At the same time, he desperately fled back to the divine ship, wanting to escape from this planet. Of course, he did not forget to send out a transmission jade slip to seek help from the evil Soul God King. He knew that the evil Soul God King was still deep in the star domain and would need at least a month to reach here. It was impossible for him to save him. However, he thought that even if he died on this planet, he had to at least let the evil Soul God King know what was going on. Only then could the evil Soul God King help him take revenge. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing waved his palm and sent out a sky full of sword flashes, killing the 200 or so Sir Gods who were lucky enough to survive. At this moment, the great general had already fled back to the divine ship. He immediately steered the divine ship into the void. Unfortunately, no matter how fast the divine ship fled, it was not as fast as Ji Tianqing. Heaven capturing Dragon Claw. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent out a golden dragon claw with a radius of 50 kilometers, grabbing the divine ship. He flipped his right hand, and the huge dragon claw grabbed the divine ship and slammed it onto the planet. Boom! There was an earth-shattering sound. Everything within 100,000 miles shook violently and countless cracks appeared on the ground. After the dust settled, one could see that the dark golden divine ship had been smashed into a pile of scrap metal. It was twisted like a fried dough twist. Swish! The great general's divine spark was still intact. In fear and desperation, he crawled out of the scrap metal and rushed into the void. However, Ji Tianqing's golden dragon claw grabbed his godhead from a distance and crushed it in an instant. Crack, crack. The oval-shaped divine spark shattered into a dozen pieces. The great general died on the spot. He didn't even have time to beg for mercy. The ruined planet gradually became quiet again. Ji Tianqing put away the divine spark fragments of the 5 divine kings and continued to cast spells to devour the planet. He was too lazy to clean up the battlefield and he didn't want to clean up the scattered spoils. These divine kings and gods of the alien races were too weak. They probably didn't have any precious treasures. Then, Ji Tianqing could devour the planet in peace. No one would disturb him anymore. Deep in the Sky Scorpion planet zone, there was a giant planet with a diameter of 100 million miles. It was covered by a bright golden light. It was called the Distant Star. This was a star with a very high grade and very few in number. As one of the overlords of the Sky Scorpion planet zone, Divine King Evil Soul lived on this planet and treated it as his base. The distant star was huge and had a vast area. It was comparable to a continent in the Dragon Realm. There were billions of alien races and hundreds of billions of other creatures living on this planet. At the same time, deep in the blue ocean, in a magnificent palace on top of the sea of clouds, Divine King Evil Soul was in the meeting hall. He stared at a 10-foot wide sand table and thought about something. The so-called sand table wasn't a model made of sand. It was a divine artifact made by an alien race. It was like a map of the entire Sky Scorpion planet zone. There were a few hundred bright stars in it. They flashed with different colors, which represented worlds with intelligent life. There were also a few 100,000 white spots, which represented dead planets. Of the few hundred planets with life, 60% were blue and 40% were red. The blue planets represented Divine King Blue Scorpion's territory. The red planets were naturally Divine King Evil Soul's territory. The famous Divine King Evil Soul was covered in a layer of black fog. His tall and burly figure was hidden in a wide black robe and cloak. Apart from a scaly tail under the black robe and a pair of scarlet eyes under the cloak, no one could see his true appearance. The meeting hall was very quiet and the atmosphere was solemn. But in reality, apart from Divine King Evil Soul, there were also a dozen Divine King generals and a few God messengers. Previously, I received news that Blue Scorpion and the Golden Crow tribe's leader had a falling out and no longer had the Golden Crow tribe's support. Everyone didn't believe it. But now, I've been waging war for 3 months. I've taken over a dozen of his planets, and he's been forced to retreat. Do you have any other questions? Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 39-26. Hearing God King Evil Soul's words, the dozen God King generals all looked ashamed. Then, everyone flattered and praised God King Evil Soul, praising him for his godlike foresight, strategizing, and so on. God King Evil Soul enjoyed this very much. He said confidently and in high spirits, although we also have peak God Kings behind us, God King Eternal Wind has always been busy. He rarely shows himself or helps us. And Blue Scorpion God King has the help of the Golden Crow clan, so we never had the chance to get rid of him. Now, he and the Golden Crow clan have a grudge and are in a cold war. This is the best chance for us to counterattack. This time, this king will do his best to attack all of Blue Scorpion God King's territories and then completely eliminate him. Everyone must pay attention to this and cooperate fully. When we successfully control the Scorpion Star Zone, this king will reward you according to your contributions. If anyone is passive and lazy, then don't blame this king for being merciless. The dozen God King generals were shocked and hurriedly bowed and said yes. At this moment, a spiritual light flew in from the sky and flew into the hall, landing in front of God King Evil Soul. The spiritual light dissipated and revealed a communication jade slip. God King Evil Soul glanced at the jade slip and a smile appeared in his scarlet eyes. He said in a dignified tone, "It's a message from Great General Su Yi. It seems he has arrived at planet Chi Ming. With Great General Su Yi's strength and methods, he will be able to capture planet Chi Ming in 10 days at most. At that time, we will use planet Chi Ming as a vanguard and speed up the pace of our attack." As he spoke, he sent his divine sense into the jade slip and read the message inside. When he heard Great General Su Yi's terrified and despairing voice, he was stunned on the spot and stopped halfway through his words. The dozen God Kings were listening attentively, but they saw God King Evil Soul's voice suddenly stop. The smile in his scarlet eyes disappeared and turned into thick anger. Instantly, the atmosphere in the hall froze again. Everyone had a bad feeling. As expected, God King Evil Soul's pitch-black claws under his sleeves crushed the communication jade slip. He shouted in a low and angry voice, "Damn it! Blue Scorpion God King still had a trick up his sleeve." The generals did not understand what was going on. Someone hurriedly asked, "My lord, what happened?" God King Evil Soul said in a deep voice, "Great General Su Yi led the troops to the Harmony Star. When they were half a day away from the Harmony Star, they encountered a God King of a different race. That person is probably Blue Scorpion Deity King's accomplice. He wants to use the teleportation divine formation to ambush us." Great General Su Yi and his soldiers took action to capture that foreign God King. However, that person was extremely powerful and had a mysterious pearl protecting him. He killed more than 1,000 divine lords. Now, the fate of Great General Su Yi is unknown. Upon hearing this news, the dozen or so generals were all shocked and began to discuss among themselves. Great General Su Yi is a high-level divine king. Not only did he bring 4 middle-level divine kings, he also brought over 1,000 divine lord experts. With so many people, they actually can't deal with a single foreign god king. That godly king of the alien race is in the 8th layer of the king god realm. No, the 9th layer of the king god realm. Blue Scorpion Deity King doesn't have any 9th stage deity kings under his command. In that case, that person is the new helper that Blue Scorpion Deity King found. Sir Region Lord, we must eliminate that foreign god king. We must not let his scheme succeed. If we let him build a teleportation divine formation on that abandoned star, Blue Scorpion Deity King's army can invade our territory at any time and attack us. The generals realized the severity of the matter and were all furious. They requested God King Evil Soul to send people to eliminate the foreign God King. God King Evil Soul naturally had the same plan. His scarlet eyes swept across everyone. After deliberating for a moment, he opened his mouth and said, "That foreign God King is a disaster and must be eliminated. However, we cannot be restrained by him. The frontal attack and battle must continue and we must increase the intensity of it. This king has decided that God King Xiang Cheng will lead the team. Cheng Yu, Hao Song, and Wu Qi, these 3 God Kings will work together and lead 300 elite divine lord experts to kill the foreign God King." The 4 God Kings who were named by God King Evil Soul immediately stood in the middle of the hall and bowed in unison to receive the order. Although there were only 4 of them, they were only leading 300 divine lord experts to deal with Ji Tianqing. From the sound of it, this force was not as good as Great General Su Ye's subordinates. But in reality, the 4 God Kings who were named were all high-level God Kings. The leader God King Xiangcheng was at the 8th level of the God King realm. He was the leader of the few great generals whom God King Evil Soul relied on the most. The other 3 high-level God Kings who worked together were about the same as Great General Su Yi. They were also at the 7th stage realm. God King Evil Soul exhorted earnestly, that foreign God King's background is unknown and his power is very strong. You must be careful and not be careless. Xiangcheng and the other 3 God Kings nodded to express their understanding. They said in unison, Sir Region Lord, please rest assured. We will definitely kill that foreign God King and completely eradicate this disaster. God King Evil Soul nodded his head in satisfaction and waved his wide sleeves, there's no time to lose. Set off immediately. The 4 God Kings bowed and took their leave. Very quickly, they left the main hall. After gathering the manpower, they steered the God ship and set off. God King Evil Soul temporarily put this matter aside and arranged the other 10 over-generals to lead the army to attack Blue Scorpion God King's territory. Not too long later, many of the generals and heralds left. The main hall regained its silence. Only God King Evil Soul was left standing in front of the sand table. He muttered to himself and sighed, God King Changfeng's whereabouts are mysterious. He has not shown his face for several decades. I don't know what important figure he is working for. Every time this king indirectly inquired, he was extremely vigilant and guarded the secret tightly. This time, if not for this king's decision to launch an attack and take the opportunity to get rid of Blue Scorpion God King, I'm afraid he would still not show his face. In another 1 or 2 months, he should appear. By then, this king must try to find out who the expert behind him is. Humph humph. When this king becomes the Star Region Lord, I will directly rely on the expert behind him. It's not a problem to be on equal footing with him. Why should I care about his mood? The low muttering voice was as hoarse as the wind. The scarlet eyes under the black robe flickered with the flames of ambition. Very clearly, this God King Evil Soul also had his own ambitions and schemes. He had long seen through that foreign race's God King Changfeng, although he was a peak God King, he was also running errands for an expert. Even though he respected God King Changfeng on the surface, God King Changfeng could not bring him too many benefits. At the very least, it was impossible for God King Changfeng to help him become a peak God King. Therefore, God King Evil Soul was absolutely not satisfied with the position of Star Region Lord. He was well aware that even if he became the Star Region Lord, he would merely be God King Changfeng's puppet and lackey. If he could climb up to that mysterious expert behind the scenes and be on equal footing with God King Changfeng, only then would he have the chance to become a peak God King. At that time, he could truly be free and unfettered, doing whatever he wanted. Chapter 39-27. God King Evil Soul stood in the hall for a while before returning to his study to deal with administrative matters. In the last few months, he had been doing his best to attack God King Blue Scorpion's territory, so he had to personally oversee the situation. Every day that he was delayed meant that all sorts of matters would pile up, waiting for him to deal with and decide. Originally, he could have left the matters of the various planets to his subordinates and strategists. He could even have let the Star Lords make their own decisions. However, he was suspicious by nature and was unwilling to trust his strategists, much less give power to the various Star Lords. He had been in the Scorpion Star Zone for more than 10,000 years, so he was most familiar with the customs of this star zone. Loyalty and trust? That's just a joke. He could only be at ease with power in his own hands. Time quietly passed. For the next half a month, God King Evil Soul had been dealing with important military matters. He commanded the various stars and the many generals who led the troops into battle. Under his command, more than 20 armies had split up and attacked God King Blue Scorpion's territory, crazily occupying one planet after another. These armies had more than 200 god kings, more than 20,000 god lords, and several 100,000 heavenly god soldiers. The various armies advanced side by side, beating the generals under Blue Scorpion God King until they were forced to retreat again and again, utterly routed. God King Evil Soul would receive news of victory from the front lines almost every 2 days. On the sand table in the middle of the conference hall, the number of blue planets was decreasing, turning red one after another. God King Evil Soul was in a great mood. Standing in front of the sand table, he could already imagine the beautiful scene of the entire Scorpion Star Zone under his rule. He had even imagined the scene of God King Blue Scorpion kneeling before him and begging for mercy in the final battle after all of God King Blue Scorpion's territory had fallen. When he thought of this beautiful future, he couldn't help but laugh. Until 20 days later, he suddenly received a message jade slip from God King Cheng. All of his beautiful fantasies were shattered, and his originally excited mood quickly cooled down as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. In these 20 days, Ji Tianqing had been casting arts on that abandoned planet, devouring the entire planet. As time passed, the silver planet rapidly shrank every day. His strength steadily increased, and the 5 elements world obtained an abundant amount of spirit chi and madly grew. It was neither too long nor too short. 20 days had just ended, and the entire star had been devoured by him. After finishing the spell, Ji Tianqing put away the heaven-mending bead and prepared to leave. But right at this time, 4 Divine King powerhouses led 300 Divine Lord powerhouses and surrounded them from all directions. These godly kings and godly lords of other races all had complicated expressions. They were shocked and fearful. While he was filled with vigilance, he was also filled with murderous intent. This was because they had arrived near the abandoned planet 2 days ago. Back then, when they saw that the silver star had shrunk to a diameter of several million li, everyone was astonished. The 4 god kings even thought that they had seen wrongly. They clearly remembered that the silver star was very large, with a diameter of at least 30 million miles. They realized that the situation was not good, so they did not act rashly. They hid in the dark and continued to observe. Over the next 2 days, they saw with their own eyes that the silver star rapidly shrank until it disappeared. That foreign god king actually destroyed the entire planet. This was the conclusion that the 4 divine kings and 300 divine monarchs came to. At the same time, they also knew that no matter how powerful and mysterious the other party was, it was time for them to appear. Therefore, they braced themselves and appeared, forming a battle formation to surround Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stood in the void and calmly scanned the crowd. Finally, his gaze landed on the 4 divine kings. He did not need to ask to guess that these divine kings and godly lords were definitely here to take revenge for those people from before. Therefore, he did not plan to waste his breath. He directly took out the sword of burial of heaven and expressionlessly accumulated his divine power, preparing to fight. However, the 300 divine monarchs were anxious, and the 4 divine kings also had something to say. Wait. The leader, Divine King Xiangcheng, sized up Ji Tianqing with a scrutinizing gaze and asked, "Sir, you should know why we are here." "You killed General Su Yi and thousands of soldiers," Ji Tianqing replied expressionlessly, "Of course I know. You are here for revenge." Divine King Xiangcheng frowned. The other party's calmness and confidence made him feel a little guilty. Therefore, he imagined that he could resolve this matter without fighting. "Sir, perhaps there is some misunderstanding. I am not only here for revenge, I am also here to investigate the truth." Divine King Xiangcheng was quick-witted and wanted to ease the atmosphere. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at him expressionlessly, not saying a word. Divine King Xiangcheng saw that he was not in a hurry to attack and knew that he was not an evil person. A glimmer of hope appeared in his heart as he hurriedly asked, "Sir, are you Divine King Blue Scorpion's subordinate?" "No," Ji Tianqing replied indifferently. Divine King Xiangcheng's eyes lit up as he asked again, then are you Divine King Blue Scorpion's friend or helper? Also no. Divine King Xiangqing was not the only one who heaved a sigh of relief. The other 3 divine kings and 300 divine monarchs all looked relieved. Sigh, as I said, this is just a misunderstanding. Divine King Xiangqing squeezed out a smile and did not feel that his expression was hideous at all. He explained, Sir should know that we are Divine King Evil Soul's subordinates. And you shouldn't have any enmity with our Divine King Evil Soul either, right? Of course not, Ji Tianqing answered truthfully, wanting to see what this guy wanted to do. Divine King Xiangqing was immediately overjoyed and hurriedly waved his hand and ordered, all put away your weapons. This is a misunderstanding. Everyone, relax. The 3 divine kings and 300 divine monarch experts put away their weapons one after another. Of course, this was just on the surface. They still did not relax their vigilance in their hearts. Divine King Xiangqing squeezed out a kind smile and explained, Sir, since it's a misunderstanding, then we don't need to meet each other with weapons. It's just that great General Su Yi and the 4 divine generals, as well as those 1,000 divine monarchs, were indeed killed by you. Although we don't have the intention of blaming you. But it's reasonable for you to make a trip with us and meet Divine King Evil Soul. Presumably, as long as you explain clearly to Divine King Evil Soul face to face and apologize, this matter can be dropped. Furthermore, our Lord Divine King is thirsty for talents and loves to make friends with all kinds of eccentric people and senior experts the most. With your strength and talent, you'll definitely receive Divine King Evil Soul's favor. Hearing Divine King Xiangqing's words, the other 3 divine kings and 300 divine monarchs all secretly nodded their heads to express praise, very impressed in their hearts. Well deserving of being a cunning old fox, this move is truly brilliant. This foreign race divine king's strength is very strong. We clearly can't beat him. At most, we can only fight until both sides suffer. But with Divine King Xiangqing saying this, we don't need to fight desperately anymore. Heh heh. As long as we trick that guy back, when he arrives in front of Divine King Evil Soul, he'll be dead for sure. With the protection of the indestructible golden body, even a peak Divine King would find it hard to injure him, let alone these 4 high Divine Kings. However, the sword light that filled the sky brought about a calamity to everyone. Following the muffled sound, a series of tragic howls sounded. The 4 god kings were sent flying as blood splattered all over the sky. Dozens of Sir God experts were torn to shreds by the sword light, and countless pieces of flesh fell to the ground. This was the first round of the battle between the 2 sides. Ji Tianqing was unscathed, and his expression was calm. He did not even take a deep breath. However, the 4 god kings were heavily injured, and they were in a sorry state. Dozens of Sir Gods were killed on the spot, and more than 20 Sir Gods were severely injured. Such a stark contrast allowed everyone to witness Ji Tianqing's terrifying strength, and they were filled with fear. However, no matter how frightened they could not immediately turn around and run away. Losing face was secondary. If God King Evil Soul knew that they were so cowardly, he would definitely punish them severely. As a result, the 4 divine kings rallied their forces and once again led over 200 divine lords to launch a second siege. They were still going all out, using all kinds of divine powers, ultimate skills, and ultimate killing moves. Divine light flashed all over the sky, and all kinds of lights and shadows danced. The momentum and commotion were huge. However, this did not affect Ji Tianqing at all. His left hand used all kinds of palm techniques, fist techniques, and finger techniques, while his right hand waved his sword and used sword Dao divine powers. When he was multitasking, the divine powers and ultimate skills that he used were still powerful. Bam! 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 Boom! Boom! There was another deafening sound, and it was mixed with the sound of explosions. As for everyone's exclamations, shouts, curses, and screams, they were all drowned out by the loud sounds. After a few breaths, the second round of the battle ended. This time, the outcome was even more tragic. More than 220 Sir God experts were blasted into pieces on the spot, scattering in the void. The 3 high-level God Kings had their divine bodies destroyed by the sword light, and their divine sparks were also severely injured as they floated in the void. Even God King Xiang Cheng's divine body was on the verge of collapse, like a cracked porcelain vase. The dozens of Sir God experts who were lucky enough to survive were scared out of their wits. Ji Tianqing's strength was too terrifying, and they did not dare to attack at all. They all screamed and fled into the depths of the starry sky. The 4 God Kings still cared about their dignity and shouted angrily a few times. Unfortunately, those Sir Gods were in a hurry to escape and did not listen to their shouts at all. Soon, they disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, the 4 God Kings did not persist. They did not even need to use voice transmissions to discuss. They all turned and fled at the same time. What was even more tacit was that they actually fled in 2 different directions. However, this was not a problem for Ji Tianqing. With a flash, he teleported thousands of miles and caught up with the 2 injured divine sparks. He raised his hand and swung his sword. In a flash of light, the 2 divine sparks were shattered into pieces. Ji Tianqing waved his left hand and kept the divine sparks in his bag. His figure flashed again and teleported 20,000 miles in the void, catching up with God King Xiang Cheng and the other divine sparks. Swish! 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 Another sword slash. After a flash of golden light, the divine sparks were shattered into pieces. God King Xiang Cheng was also killed on the spot. His body was destroyed, and his divine sparks were shattered. At this point, the 4 foreign race God Kings were all killed. Ji Tianqing put away the divine sparks and rode on the sword of burial of heaven, continuing to fly into the depths of the star field. As for the dozens of Sir Gods who were fleeing in all directions, he could not be bothered to chase after them. He let them escape. It did not matter if those Sir Gods lived or died. In any case, they were not a threat to him. However, he felt that these high God Kings needed to be eliminated. As the sword of burial of heaven flew into the depths of the starry sky, he summarized the information he had just received and analyzed the current situation. These people are all subordinates of God King Evil Soul. God King Evil Soul and God King Blue Scorpion are irreconcilable. They are fighting over the position of Master of the Star Field. In that case, Long Yen and I did not kill the Golden Crow Patriarch back then. As expected, enmity arose between him and God King Blue Scorpion. When God King Evil Soul learned of this, he was certain that God King Blue Scorpion had lost his backer and was at his weakest. Thus, God King Evil Soul decisively launched an attack and invaded God King Blue Scorpion's territory. Right now, God King Blue Scorpion must be having a headache and retreating in defeat, right? God King Blue Scorpion and God King Evil Soul were fighting to the death over the position of Master of the Star Field. However, Ji Tianqing had no interest in this position and could not be bothered to meddle in other people's business. However, there was a small question in his heart that he could not help but mutter to himself. The 9 great star fields all have their own overlords. Most of them have been occupied by the 5 God Emperors. Even the Sacred Dragon Emperor, Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, and Ophiuchus have each occupied a star field. However, why has this Scorpion star field not been occupied by any power? Why is it being fought over by 2 foreign race God Kings? Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3929. In the depths of Scorpio Galaxy, distant star. In the depths of the vast sea, in the divine palace at the peak of the Sea of Clouds. God King Evil Soul was currently in the meeting hall, standing in front of the sand table, holding the message he sent back to God King Xiang Cheng, his expression ugly to the extreme. He had already finished reading the contents of the message Jade Slip. But he stood on the spot and was silent for a long time, not making a sound. But the scarlet eyes under the cloak flickered with surging fury. Under the black robe, his entire body was bursting with sharp killing intent. It was because this message was sent back to Divine King Xiangqing before he died. In the message, God King Xiangqing described the situation of the battle at that time, and used the words unparalleled valiance, unrivaled, to describe Ji Tianqing's strength. God King Evil Soul did not need to ask and could guess that God King Xiangqing, 3 high-ranking God Kings, and 300 God Lord experts should have all died in battle. For high-level Divine Kings were killed, causing his forces to weaken further. Those were 4 great generals who were good at war and had made countless contributions to the army. God King Evil Soul's heart ached and was furious, but also felt deeply helpless. After all, he was the commander. It was impossible for him to personally rush over to kill Ji Tianqing. Moreover, according to God King Xiangqing's description, Ji Tianqing's strength was so powerful that it already surpassed him. Although God King Evil Soul was 9th stage realm strength. But he knew that he could not be like Ji Tianqing, instantly killing over 200 God Lord experts and 3 high-ranking God Kings in 3 moves. God King Evil Soul could not possibly take the risk himself, and also did not have the confidence to defeat Ji Tianqing. But his subordinates, the strongest one was only at the initial stage of the 9th level God King realm. No matter how hard he thought about it, he still didn't know who to send to kill Ji Tianqing. Rustle, God King Evil Soul paced back and forth in the great hall. After suppressing his anger, he started to think of countermeasures. Although God King Xiangqing had probed before, that person claimed to have nothing to do with Blue Scorpion God King, and also has no enmity with this seat. But how can that person's words be believed? He has already broken into my territory and killed more than 1,000 soldiers under my command, including several capable generals. If he is not killed as soon as possible and is allowed to roam freely in my territory, there is no telling how many generals and star lords he will assassinate. At that time, my territory will fall into chaos, and he alone will be able to contain my army. No, I have to get rid of this disaster no matter what. In the Scorpio Star Zone, various races lived together. The law of the jungle had always been followed. The strong preyed on the weak. This place was filled with mutual deception. There was never any kindness or trust to speak of. Even if Ji Tianqing told God King Evil Soul that he had nothing to do with God King Blue Scorpion, God King Evil Soul wouldn't believe him. The Evil Soul God King only wanted to get rid of those who harmed his interests and were beyond his control. After making up his mind, God King Evil Soul issued another order to the messengers in the corner of the hall. Contact Divine King Xiangqing and the 3 great generals, as well as the 300 Divine Monarch experts they brought with them. See if there are any survivors. If there are, ask them about the course of the battle and the movements of that foreign God King. The messengers bowed and hurriedly left to carry out their mission. God King Evil Soul returned to his seat of honor and sat down on his black skeletal throne to wait. About an hour later, the messengers returned to the hall one after another to report the results. Reporting to the Domain Lord, we can't contact Divine King Xiangqing and the 3 great generals. Their soul jade tablets in the Martyr's Palace have all shattered. Reporting to the Domain Lord, this subordinate went to the Martyr's Palace to count the soul jade tablets and discovered that the jade tablets of 256 divine monarchs had shattered. Reporting to the Domain Lord, 44 of them survived. This subordinate managed to contact 30 or so of them. They all claimed that they hid in the dark to observe the situation after arriving at the abandoned planet. They saw with their own eyes that the alien godly king had destroyed the entire planet. Divine King Xiangqing tried to trick that person into returning and handing him over to you, but that person didn't fall for it. The messengers each carried out their own duties. The last messenger who reported the news combined the words of more than 30 Divine Lord experts and told God King Evil Soul about the specific process. After God King Evil Soul finished listening, the scarlet eyes under the cloak clearly flickered several times, revealing a trace of shock. That alien godly king actually destroyed the entire waste star. It's just a lifeless, useless planet. Why would he destroy it? God King Evil Soul muttered to himself, then asked, "Does anyone know what that foreign God King did after the battle ended?" The last messenger hurriedly bowed and reported again, reporting to the domain lord, the 30 or so divine monarchs that survived all scattered and fled. A dozen or so divine monarchs saw that foreign God King flying toward the depths of the star field. If he doesn't change direction, he'll reach the distant star soon. God King Evil Soul was instantly enraged. He growled with killing intent, "Despicable bastard, he's clearly the Blue Scorpion God King's helper, deliberately disrupting this seat's territory. He actually claimed that he has nothing to do with the Blue Scorpion God King. Does he think we're 3 years old?" God King Evil Soul was enraged. Outside his black robe, raging flames ignited. The few messengers were trembling with fear, not daring to even breathe loudly. After a moment, God King Evil Soul's anger finally subsided. He thought to himself, "That person can destroy the entire planet. I'm afraid his strength is above this seat. Just based on this seat's soldiers, I'm afraid they won't be able to kill him. If I gather dozens of God Kings and thousands of divine monarchs, I'll definitely be able to kill him. But in this way, there won't be enough manpower at the front line and there won't be any generals who can lead the troops into battle. Ha ha ha, a 9th stage God King messed up this seat's attack plan. Blue Scorpion God King, you're really scheming." While sneering in his heart, God King Evil Soul took out a communication jade letter and entered a message. "Respected God King Eternal Wind, you've urged this subordinate many times to quickly get rid of the Blue Scorpion God King and control the entire Scorpion star field. This subordinate has not forgotten your instructions for a single day. For the past 2 months, this subordinate took the opportunity when the Blue Scorpion God King fell out with the Golden Crow clan and decisively sent out troops to attack. We've already defeated the Blue Scorpion God King and occupied over 20 stars. Originally, when you came to the distant star, the final battle would have reached its final stage. You can also see with your own eyes that this subordinate defeated the Blue Scorpion God King and controlled the entire star field. But just a month ago, a foreign race God King barged into this subordinate's territory and assassinated several God King generals. This person's strength is above this subordinate's and he must be the Blue Scorpion God King's helper. He wants to use his own strength to restrict this subordinate's attack plan. Unfortunately, this subordinate has to stay in the distant star and command the army in the middle. Otherwise, this subordinate will personally lead the troops to kill that foreign race God King. The plan now is for Lord God King to hurry back and personally get rid of that foreign race God King. With Lord God King's godly methods, it will be as easy as flipping your palm." Chapter 39:30. Clearly, Divine King Evil Soul realized that Ji Tianqing's strength was too powerful. He could not afford to provoke him, but he also did not wish to have Ji Tianqing ruin his attack plan. Therefore, he transmitted a message to Divine King Longwind to seek help. Whoosh! The transmission jade slip carried his heart full of hope and turned into a beam of spirit light that flew out of the Divine Palace, vanishing into the horizon. Divine King Evil Soul stared at the sand table in the hall and secretly sneered coldly in his heart, "Divine King Longwind, although you're a peak Divine King with formidable strength, I've submitted you to me for hundreds of years. I have submitted to you for hundreds of years, but you treated me like a slave and ordered me around as you wished. But you've only shown your face more than a dozen times to this day. You're always busy. This time, you have to put in the effort and eliminate that foreign race Divine King personally. Otherwise, unifying the entire Scorpio starfield is all my credit and has nothing to do with you at all." At the end of the day, Divine King Evil Soul submitted to Divine King Longwind's strength, but he was unwilling and dissatisfied in his heart. He had always been scheming that after unifying the Scorpio starfield, he would rely on this gargantuan contribution to establish ties with the powerhouse behind Divine King Longwind. Only then would he have the chance to become a peak Divine King. Once he became a peak Divine King, he would no longer need to look at Divine King Longwind's face. At that time, he would be one of the 9 great overlords in the starry sky, his authority overwhelming. Unknowingly, another 2 hours passed. Whoosh! A beam of spirit light flew over from the horizon and landed in front of Divine King Evil Soul. After the golden light faded, a transmission jade slip with a special shape appeared. This was the transmission jade slip that he used to communicate with Divine King Longwind. Divine King Evil Soul picked up the transmission jade slip and read the message inside with his divine sense. Immediately, a deep and dignified old man's voice sounded out in his mind. Evil Soul, you can't even finish off a foreign race Divine King. You disappoint this seat too much. Over 200 years ago, this seat urged you repeatedly to take control of the Scorpio starfield as soon as possible and not delay Lord Supreme's plan. And you delayed until now and finally found a chance to take action, but you were hindered by a foreign race Divine King. You have over 100 Divine Kings under your command and millions of soldiers. That foreign race Divine King isn't a peak Divine King. You can't even kill him. This seat expresses doubts about your ability. I'm on my way to faraway star. It will take me more than a month to reach there. Now, I'll give you one last chance. You will personally lead the soldiers to eliminate that alien God King. If you can't do it, then don't blame me for reporting to Lord Supreme and asking for a new domain lord to take control of the Scorpio galaxy. There wasn't much information in the jade slip, but every sentence was very sharp. The dignified tone was filled with anger, and there was also a hint of arrogance. God King Evil Soul was instantly enraged after reading the message. His black claws crushed the jade slip into pieces. Goddamn old man. Other than using that Lord Supreme martial artist to threaten me, have you ever made any contribution at all? If it weren't for the fact that I'm weaker than you, I would have cut you into pieces sooner or later. In his rage, the God King Evil Soul could not help but curse. You actually want me to personally deal with that foreign God King? If I disobey, someone else will be in charge of the Scorpio galaxy. What an arrogant tone. Truly arrogant and ignorant. The Evil Soul Deity King was unable to restrain his anger, and he felt extremely aggrieved. He had always insisted that he was the most suitable person to be the Scorpio Galaxy Lord. Unfortunately, his strength was inferior. If he did not submit to God King Changfeng, he would be obliterated. At the same time, he had to rely on God King Changfeng as his backer to defeat God King Blue Scorpion. Especially the supreme martial artist that God King Changfeng mentioned. He was the target that he deliberately wanted to get in touch with. He had heard many rumors and analyzed them. He came to a shocking conclusion. That supreme martial artist was able to make a peak God King submit to him and do his best to run errands. He was very likely an expert above the God King realm. God King Evil Soul did not know what realm was above the God King realm. However, he believed that supreme martial artist would definitely have a way to help him become a peak God King. A moment later, God King Evil Soul regained his composure. He ordered in a dignified tone, "Send orders to the Star Lords in the southwest. Order them to closely monitor the movements in the void and investigate the movements of that alien God King. Also, summon Marshal Lei Ming to see me." A few messengers acknowledged the order and hurriedly went to carry out the mission. Not long after, a burly alien God King strode into the conference hall with his head held high. This alien God King had the upper body of a human but the lower body of a purple flame demon wolf. He had 4 hooves and a tail. He wore purple lightning armor and had a sharp horn on his head. He exuded a violent and fierce aura. This was Marshal Lei Ming. He was an early-stage 9th Heaven God King. He was the godson of the Evil Soul God King, and also the second most powerful person under the Evil Soul God King. Although he was a brave general with a high prestige in the Scorpio space zone, and many generals admired and were loyal to him, he was still a general of the Scorpion space zone. However, God King Evil Soul was naturally suspicious. When he saw that Marshal Laming's prestige and power were increasing, he had the intention to suppress him. He was also worried that Marshal Laming would go against his orders one day and take away his position as the Star Zone Master. Therefore, he personally commanded the attack on God King Blue Scorpion's territory. He even left Marshal Laming on the distant star and did not allow him to participate in the battle. Marshal Laming and many other generals were well aware of this point. There was no other way. Marshal Laming's military achievements were outstanding and his power was overwhelming. He could not be given a title or reward. Other than the position of Star Zone Master, God King Evil Soul had nothing else to give him. Under such circumstances, it was natural for Marshal Laming to be suppressed. Godfather, what instructions do you have for me? Marshal Laming stood in the hall and bowed to God King Evil Soul as he asked respectfully. Although he could not fight on the battlefield, he was still a little resentful. However, in front of God King Evil Soul, he did not dare to show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction lest he attract a fatal disaster. God King Evil Soul stared at him for a while before saying earnestly, Laming, I know that you have misunderstood me and have some resentment in your heart. However, you must know that I am doing this for your own good. I don't allow you to fight on the front lines because I have something more important to hand to you. Marshal Laming naturally did not believe in such rubbish, but he still revealed an agitated look as he hurriedly asked, Godfather, please instruct me. I will do my best. God King Evil Soul's tone was calm as he said, although God King Blue Scorpion and Golden Crow clan had fallen out, he had colluded with a 9th stage realm foreign race God King. In the past month, that foreign race God King had killed several of our generals and even massacred 1,000 over God Monarch experts. Now, that foreign race God King had barged into this seat's territory and is heading straight for the distant star. Hearing this, Marshal Laming put on a stance as he rubbed his palms together and hurriedly said, Godfather, please give the order. I will lead the elite troops to kill that foreign race God King. Chapter 39-31. Marshal Thundercry naturally thought that Divine King Heretic Soul wanted to send him to kill Ji Tianqing. After all, he also heard about that foreign race Divine King and knew that that person's strength was very formidable. This sort of life-threatening mission, he had completed God knows how many times and was long used to it. But this time, he guessed wrong. Divine King Heretic Soul stared at him and fell silent for a moment. But other thoughts surfaced in his mind. Little bastard, the moment you heard that you want to lead troops into battle, you're so impatient. If I really let you lead troops to kill that foreign race Divine King, this seat would be defying Divine King Longwind's orders, while you'll have rendered a great service. At that time, when Divine King Longwind comes to the distant star, he'll probably have you replace this seat to be the master of this stellar region. Thinking up to here, Divine King Heretic Soul's scarlet eyes also became a little colder. No, you're wrong. He looked at Marshal Thundercry and said earnestly, that foreign race Divine King's strength is very strong, even above Foster Father's. You're not his match. Foster Father won't send you to your death. This time, Foster Father will personally lead troops to go and kill him. And you will stay in the Divine Palace to hold down the fort and command the battle at the front lines. You have to remember that you absolutely can't slow down the offensive. You must defeat the Blue Scorpion Divine King in one go. If you miss this opportunity, who knows how many years you'll have to wait to defeat him again in the future. Ah! Marshal Thundercry was stunned on the spot, only finding it incredulous. Foster Father, you're the commander-in-chief. How can you personally lead troops to kill a powerful enemy? This sort of dangerous matter should be left to this child. Marshal Thundercry understood Divine King Heretic Soul's nature very well. He knew that his foster father was not only suspicious by nature, but he also cherished his life very much. This decision today was seriously too abnormal. Divine King Heretic Soul said in a dignified tone, "Thundercry, don't question this seat's decision. This is an order." Marshal Thundercry's expression turned stiff. He could only bow and say, "This child obeys." "Foster father, set your mind at ease and go to war. This child definitely won't let you down." N. Divine King Heretic Soul nodded his head in satisfaction and said, "That foreign race Divine King's strength is too strong. This seat setting off this time, I must kill him in one blow. Therefore, the 9 divine generals and the 16 star lords in the divine palace will follow me to the battle. In this way, there will only be a few divine kings left in the divine palace. Their forces will be weak. You must be on your guard. Nothing must go wrong." Hearing this, a strange look flashed across Marshal Lei Ming's eyes as he sneered in his heart. "Hee hee. Godfather, oh Godfather, you're still on guard against me. You are afraid that after you go to war, I will take control of the divine palace and take over your position. Therefore, you took away the 25 high god kings who were loyal to you, and the divine palace was only left with an empty shell. Even if I wanted to rebel, I would only get a useless divine palace." He thought so in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Marshal Lei Ming bowed and accepted the order. "Foster father is risking your life to kill a strong enemy, so you should bring more men. With those 25 god kings, not only will they be able to protect you, they'll also be able to kill foreign god kings successfully. This is a wise decision. Please don't worry, Foster father. I will guard the celestial palace well. Nothing will go wrong." God King Evil Soul nodded in satisfaction and said, "Good. Then prepare to take over the intelligence reports and begin to control the overall situation. Within 3 days, I will lead the troops to war once I have received accurate information." Marshal Lei Ming didn't say anything else. After acknowledging the order, he left the meeting hall. God King Evil Soul also issued several orders to gather the 9 great god kings and 16 star lords. Apart from these 25 high god kings, he also wanted to take away 10 intermediate god kings and 1,000 high god lords. This was practically the strongest force in the divine palace. After he set out for battle, what he left for Marshal Thundercry was only over 3,000 divine lord realm guards and several middle-level divine kings. In the next 2 days, the dozens of star lords in the southwest all sent messages to God King Evil Soul. Most of the star lords reported that they hadn't detected anything unusual and hadn't seen that foreign god king. Only a few star lords detected unusual movements in the void. They did their best to send out all their scouts and spies, and discovered that a mysterious expert was hurrying through the void. Although no one knew what that expert looked like. Based on his flying speed, it was obvious that he was one of the best among the god kings. God King Evil Soul combined the reports of the star lords and confirmed one thing. That damned foreign god king is indeed heading toward the distant star. If there are no accidents, he'll probably arrive in a few months. Based on his current tracks and speed, he should be near planet Yoqiong. After confirming Ji Tianqing's tracks and route, God King Evil Soul decisively led the many god kings and nearly 1,000 high god lords and set off on a divine warship. So many god kings and god lords boarded his Evil Soul warship and left planet Yoqiong, heading straight for planet Yoqiong. The Evil Soul warship was one of God King Evil Soul's trump cards that allowed him to dominate the Scorpion Star Zone. He had spent hundreds of years of effort and thousands of years of savings to build this king-grade divine warship. Its attack power was strong, its defense was strong, and its flying speed was extremely fast. The battleship was like a black ghost, silently advancing through the void. On the way, God King Evil Soul was still analyzing the situation. I'm heading toward planet Yoqiong. That guy is coming from planet Yoqiong. In at most a month and a half, we'll meet near planet Flying Deer. At that time, we'll fight in the void and make it his burial ground. God King Evil Soul had 35 God Kings and 1,000 High God Lords by his side. He was full of confidence. He believed that even if the other party was a peak divine king, he would also be smashed to pieces under the besiegement of so many powerhouses, perishing with hatred. At the same time, on a certain star in the center of the Scorpion star zone. This star with a diameter of more than 300 million miles was inconspicuous in God King Blue Scorpion's territory. However, it was not far from the front lines of the battle. About a dozen stars ahead of them was the battlefield where the two armies were fighting. God King Blue Scorpion was different from God King Evil Soul. He would not stay in his base and command the battle through a communication jade slip. Ever since God King Evil Soul sent his army to attack 2 months ago, he had been commanding the front lines with his trusted aides and generals. At this time, God King Blue Scorpion was holding a top-secret message and discussing important matters with his generals in the conference hall. I believe everyone knows that a few hundred years ago, I sent over 500 spies to infiltrate God King Evil Soul's base in batches. Unfortunately, most of the spies were eliminated in these few hundred years, and some spies defected. There are only a few spies left, and they're still hiding in Distant Star. One of them is hiding in God King Evil Soul's Divine Palace. When God King Evil Soul was overseeing the Divine Palace, he did not dare to act rashly, so he did not send back any news. Just now, he sent back a message. God King Evil Soul is leading over 30 God Kings and close to 1,000 High God elites toward planet Yocheong. His intentions are unknown. Currently, only Marshal Lei Ming is overseeing the Divine Palace. It's almost an empty shell. Chapter 39-32. Other than the Blue Scorpion God King, there were over 20 other God King generals in the discussion hall. They were all his trusted subordinates. Half of them were the star lords of nearby planets. When everyone heard the news from the Blue Scorpion God King, they immediately became excited and expectant. Many of the generals couldn't help but open their mouths to discuss the matter or give suggestions to the Blue Scorpion God King. We all know that the Evil Soul Deity King is suspicious by nature, and is especially wary of his adopted son, Marshal Lei Ming. When he leaves the Distant Star, he will definitely bring most of the experts with him. Ever since the start of the war, we've been in a very passive situation. We've been beaten back repeatedly. This is a good opportunity for us to fight back. Alliance Master, since the Distant Star is empty and only Marshal Lei Ming is there, we can launch a sneak attack. No matter what the God King Evil Soul is doing, we will destroy his lair. To him, this is definitely a huge blow. Lord Alliance Master, this general believes that it is wisest to first investigate the Evil Soul God King's intentions before making a decision. Please contact the spy and ask him to investigate this matter. This general believes that there is no need to ambush the Evil Soul God King's lair. The most important thing is to gather the troops and rush to the Yucheong region to kill the Evil Soul Deity King. That's right. God King Evil Soul had brought over 30 God Kings and 1,000 High God Lords. It sounded like a very powerful force. But we can gather even more experts and soldiers, and we will definitely be able to kill the Evil Soul Deity King. As long as the Evil Soul God King dies, his army will be defeated without a fight, and our crisis will be resolved. But have you all thought about it? Even if the Evil Soul God King dies, his adopted son, Marshal Lei Ming, will definitely take over. At that time, Marshal Lei Ming will still attack us in the name of avenging foster father. Don't worry, once the Evil Soul Divine King dies, the forces under him will definitely fall into chaos. Even if Marshal Lei Ming wanted to take over, it would be a long time before he could do so. Who knows, we might be able to take advantage of the situation and counterattack. Only half of the over 20 Divine King Realm generals were talking about it. Even so, the hall was still very noisy. The Blue Scorpion God King did not get angry. He only calmly listened to everyone's discussion. Since he had gathered everyone for a discussion, he wanted to listen to everyone's opinions. After everyone finished speaking, the blue scorpion god king slapped the table, indicating for everyone to quiet down. He said in a dignified tone, "Everyone's words have their own reasons, and they are indeed feasible methods. However, after careful consideration, I have decided to gather more godly kings and godly monarchs to make a trip to planet Yocheong. Attacking the evil soul god king's lair was meaningless. If he could kill him, he would be able to resolve the current crisis. Taking a step back, even if we can't kill God King Evil Soul, we can at least find out what he's trying to do. I believe everyone knows that the Evil Soul Deity King cherishes his life. For so many years, he had been staying in his lair in the distant star. He didn't move around at all, let alone go to the battlefield to kill enemies. Since he left faraway star and went to poor star, there must be a reason. Since the Blue Scorpion God King had made his decision, the 20-odd generals could only follow his orders. Afterward, God King Blue Scorpion issued several orders and began to gather even more God Kings and elites. More than 20 generals also left the meeting hall one after another to carry out their mission. In a short 2 days, more than 20 God Kings led more than 1,000 godly monarchs to report on the completion of the mission. The Blue Scorpion God King mobilized so many people, causing the front lines to become tense. However, he ordered the generals at the front lines to not counterattack in the short term and to do their best to defend. If the enemy's offensive was too fierce, they could also choose to strategically retreat to preserve their strength. Just like that, on the morning of the third day, the Blue Scorpion God King led a group of elite soldiers to battle. In the 2 divine ships, there were a total of 48 God Kings and 3,000 godly monarchs. With such a powerful force, the Blue Scorpion God King had an 80% chance of killing the Evil Soul Deity King if they encountered him. Ever since he killed God King Xiang Cheng and the others, Ji Tianqing had been traveling the cosmos. Although he guessed that the Evil Soul Deity King might send a large force to kill him to avenge the dead soldiers, he was not worried at all. He continued to fly into the depths of the Scorpion Star Zone. Along the way, he encountered more than 20 stars. Most of these stars had living beings and all kinds of foreign races gathered there. As for the few wasted stars he encountered, they were all extremely barren and desolate, containing very few resources. If he refined these wasted stars, not only would he waste time, he would also not gain much. Thus, the Sword of Burial of Heaven continued to fly into the depths of the star zone. Ji Tianqing remained in the distorted spacetime and continued to cultivate. While cultivating in seclusion, he would often ponder a question. If Master had perished in the Scorpion Star Zone back then, would he have alarmed some God King experts? Or perhaps, would he have left behind some traces? How should I investigate to find clues? Every time I pass by a star, I will capture the Star Lord and many God Kings and ask them if they know anything about this matter. Every time he thought of this question, Ji Tianqing would feel deeply moved. Even though he already had the strength of a peak God King, compared to the vast star zone, he was still too insignificant. If he really did this, finding clues was secondary. Most importantly, he would have to spend 100 years. Investigating the Scorpion Star Zone would take 100 years. If he were to investigate all 9 star zones, it would take at least 1,000 years. Thus, Ji Tianqing could only give up on this stupid and time-wasting method. He had to think of a better way to find clues about his master's death as quickly as possible. Unknowingly, a month passed. Ji Tianqing discovered that the deeper he went into the Scorpion Star Zone, the fewer wasted stars around him. On the contrary, the stars inhabited by living beings were each larger than the last. Their diameters exceeded 500 million miles, and they could accommodate hundreds of trillions of living beings. After much difficulty, he found another wasted star. This barren star was only 40 million miles in diameter, and its surface emitted a faint golden light. When he arrived near the golden star, he used his divine sense to investigate carefully and discovered that the wasted star contained a large amount of metal and/or veins. There were many precious divine metals on the star, and even some metals he had never seen before. Thus, Ji Tianqing decisively descended on this star, took out the heaven-mending orb, and began to devour the star. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 10 days passed quickly. Under his and the heaven-mending orb's devouring, the golden star shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. The heaven-mending orb devoured a huge amount of divine power, and once again brought a spiritual energy storm to the 5 elements realm. Ji Tianqing also obtained a huge amount of divine power, and his strength increased by another step. At the same time, he also summoned Yank and had Yank mine the ore veins and metals, refining many precious divine metals. Chapter 39-33. Ji Tianqing and the heaven-mending orb were devouring the star with all their might. Yank went underground to look for rare ores and metals, mining happily. However, they did not know that this star had been a famous star for thousands of years. Divine King powerhouses from the surrounding few stars would come here every few days to gather resources and search for precious artifact refinement materials. While at this time, on the other end of the star, there were currently 2 Divine King powerhouses leading several dozen Divine Lord realm experts, collecting all kinds of ores and metals. These foreign race experts came from the Flying Deer star, which was hundreds of millions of miles away. They were 2 famous divine blacksmiths on the Flying Deer star. They had brought dozens of disciples to collect resources and learn how to identify rare ores and metals. They had come to this star a month ago. For a whole month, they lived a fulfilling and interesting life. They were happy. However, in recent days, they were anxious and restless. They could not be happy, because they found that the ore star was shrinking. Moreover, it was shrinking at an exaggerated speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. This caused the dozens of disciples to be frightened and uneasy, and they were puzzled. The 2 divine blacksmiths were also puzzled and could not find a solution. They could not figure out why the ore star was shrinking when the void was calm and there were no black holes or void storms. There was a Divine Lord realm disciple who boldly raised a hypothesis. Could there be a powerful divine beast or a powerful godly king devouring this ore star? Without a doubt, this disciple was mocked by the other disciples. He was even criticized by the 2 divine blacksmiths for being too imaginative and whimsical. However, it was a fact that the ore star was shrinking. No one could think of a reason. The dozens of disciples urged the 2 divine blacksmiths to search the ore star and find out what was going on. Therefore, the 2 divine blacksmiths led the disciples and flew around the ore star on the divine ship. 1 day later, they found something. When they reached the other side of the ore star, they saw with their own eyes that there was a huge net of white light on the surface of the ore star. There were also 2 huge white vortexes. The net of white light was hundreds of thousands of miles wide. The 2 huge vortexes were also more than 10,000 miles wide. The 2 divine craftsmen came closer and observed carefully, only to discover that the light net and the 2 vortexes were the culprits. That whimsical disciple was right. Someone was indeed devouring this mineral star. The 2 divine blacksmiths were infuriated. As everyone knew, this mineral star was a famous mine nearby. Experts from more than 10 stars around would come here to collect resources. However, there was a tacit agreement between the many stars. As long as one had the strength and means, anyone could come here to collect resources and search for rare materials. However, they must not kill the goose that lays the golden eggs and catch all of them in one go. It was even more impossible for them to occupy this ore star and take all the resources for themselves. This method would incur the wrath of the masses, and he would be besieged by the experts of more than a dozen stars. Damn it! I want to see which blind bastard is so selfish that he wants to destroy everyone's mineral star. With this thought in mind, the 2 divine craftsmen steered the divine warship and landed on the star, stopping above the white light vortex. When the 2 sides were separated by 10,000 feet, they saw a white figure. It was a white-robed, black-haired young man of a foreign race. He was concentrating on casting a spell. Although they couldn't detect his strength and energy, however, judging from his appearance and temperament, he was definitely a God King expert. What race is that? Do any of you know? One of the divine craftsmen stared at the white-robed young man for a while and asked the others with a puzzled expression. Everyone shook their heads, expressing their doubts and curiosity. I've never seen him before. He looks very thin and weak. What race is that? Why is he so ugly? Yes. He doesn't have any gorgeous colors, nor does he have a huge body, nor does he have sharp claws or wings. He doesn't even have fangs. He's the only one. Let's capture him and make him suffer everyone's anger. Although the two divine craftsmen couldn't see through the white-robed young man's cultivation, they were still a little hesitant. However, the dozens of young disciples were filled with righteous indignation and looked like they were going to get rid of a pest for the people. The two divine craftsmen didn't want to lose face in front of their disciples, so they had to show up and reprimand the white-robed young man. Swoosh! Swoosh! The two divine craftsmen flew out of the divine worship and looked down at the white-robed young man. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he take the resources of the Ur star? Bastards of the alien race, this Ur star belongs to everyone. No one dares to take the Ur star for themselves. You have angered everyone. Get out of here. In fact, Ji Tianqing had already sensed the divine worship when it was 100,000 miles away from the surface of the Ur star. He thought that the evil soul divine king had come to seek revenge, so he waited quietly. Who would have thought that two ugly foreign race elders would pop out and curse at him as soon as they opened their mouths? He immediately stopped casting spells and opened his eyes to look at the two divine craftsmen and the divine worship. Did the evil soul divine king send you here? Do you think you can avenge others with your insignificant strength? The two divine craftsmen were stunned and asked in confusion, Evil soul divine king? Avenge others? What do you mean? Listen up, you bastard. We're famous divine blacksmiths on the flying deer planet. I am divine craftsman Yan Liang and this is divine craftsman Wen Chou. We are here to teach our disciples how to mine ores and identify different types of divine metals. We have nothing to do with the people you are talking about. We just can't stand you breaking the rules and selfishly taking the Ur star for yourself. Although the two divine craftsmen were furious, they did not lose their minds. They did not want to be misunderstood by Ji Tianqing and start a fight. Therefore, they revealed their identities and intentions, hoping that the other party would back off. But unfortunately, their hopes were destined to be dashed. Yan Liang, Wen Chou. Divine craftsman. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, you want to be a busybody? Then you should at least consider your own strength. Don't get yourself into trouble. With that, he continued to cast the devouring divine ability to devour the star's energy. The two divine craftsmen were humiliated by him in front of their disciples and were instantly enraged. Bastard, how dare you be so arrogant? Bastard from the alien race, if I don't teach you a lesson, you will not know your place. The two divine craftsmen were enraged and were about to take out their weapons and attack Ji Tianqing with their divine abilities. At this time, Ji Tianqing did not even raise his head. He waved his hand and threw out 3 giant golden swords that were thousands of feet long, attacking the two divine craftsmen and the divine ship. Bam, bam, bam. In the next moment, the two divine craftsmen were hit by the giant golden swords and were sent flying back with blood spurting out of their orifices. The divine ship was also hit by the sword radiance and a huge hole appeared. The dozens of disciples in the divine ship were scared out of their wits. Scram! Ji Tianqing shouted coldly. Sorry to disturb, the two divine blacksmiths hurriedly wiped the blood off their faces, entered the divine worship, and fled in dejection. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 39-34. The two divine blacksmiths left even faster and disappeared in a short while. There was a huge hole in the back of the divine battleship, making it look even more pathetic. Inside the spacious hall of the divine battleship, the dozens of disciples who had yet to recover from the shock looked at the two divine blacksmiths in ragged clothes with bloodstains all over their faces. Cough cough. Divine blacksmith Yen Liang coughed out blood as he tried to put on a calm and serious expression. Everyone, you have to understand that the reason why I demonstrated just now was to teach you a lesson. In the future, when you meet powerful cultivators, you have to avoid them and never fight them. Try to convince them with your virtue. If you can't convince them with your virtue, then take a detour and prioritize your own life. You only have one life, and you can't get it back. Remember, only those who survive have the right to talk about courage, dignity, and revenge. The dozens of disciples nodded to show that they understood, and their complicated expressions quickly disappeared. Now that I've explained it, it doesn't seem so embarrassing anymore. In fact, it seems a little wise, Divine Blacksmith Yen Liang thought to himself with a serious expression. Divine Blacksmith Wen Chou added, I know that all of you are young and hot-blooded. If the other party is your enemy, the kind that can't live under the same sky as you. If you fight with your life on the line, then you can be considered brave. However, the situation just now is different. We don't know that alien youth, nor do we have any feud with him, so there's no need to fight with him. The dozens of disciples nodded again with an expression that said, you make a lot of sense. However, at this moment, the disciple who was indulging in wild fantasies and, having a hole in his head, suddenly said something. But teachers, both of you have been severely injured by him, and the divine battleship has also been damaged. How can you tolerate this? Are we going to swallow our pride just because the other party is too powerful? At this moment, the two divine blacksmiths' pupils contracted, and they wanted to strangle that blabbermouth to death. However, there were more than 20 young disciples who all had very indignant expressions on their faces as they all opened their mouths to agree. That's right, teachers, we have to take revenge. That alien youth is too arrogant, we have to get rid of him. If the two teachers are humiliated, then we are humiliated. Although we can't beat that guy together, we can think of a way to deal with him. Initially, the two divine blacksmiths were a little embarrassed by the commotion caused by their disciples. When they heard the last female disciple's words, their eyes lit up and they regained their solemn demeanor. This disciple is absolutely right. We don't have to fight the enemy head-on. We can outsmart them. That's right. That man wanted to refine the mineral star and take all the resources for himself, which had enraged many people. I will inform the star lords of the surrounding dozen or so stars and ask them to help. In fact, I will even report this to the evil soul god king. The awkward situation was resolved by the two divine blacksmiths just like that. When the disciples saw Wen Chou take out the communication jade slip, they all revealed expressions of surprise and admiration. Wow, Master can actually contact the evil soul divine king. It can be seen that your status is too high. Master, not only have you met the evil soul god king, you've also received his recognition, right? In the eyes of these young disciples, the evil soul god king was the mighty domain lord. To be able to meet the evil soul god king and receive his recognition was an incomparable honor. In fact, Yen Liang and Wen Chou could not contact the evil soul god king. They were not qualified enough. But since they had already bragged, they could not slap themselves in the face. The two of them could only go against their conscience and smile as they accepted the praises of the disciples. Although we are not qualified to contact the evil soul god king, we can send a message to the flying deer star lord and ask him to report to the evil soul god king. When this thought flashed past their minds, they felt that they were not lying and were not bragging. The evil soul battleship was speeding through the void. It had already traveled continuously for 40 days. In another 3 days, it would reach the flying deer star. 1,000 Sir God experts and over 30 God King experts were recuperating in the divine battleship. Only the evil soul God King had his eyes closed and was unable to cultivate. In these 40 days, he had to receive many messages and listen to the reports of the various star lords and generals. At the same time, he had to use the communication jade slip to control the various star lords and god king experts. But what disappointed him was that there was no trace of the foreign race god king on the flying deer star and the other 20 or so stars around it. He could not help but worry. Had that guy gone into hiding? The Scorpion star zone was so big. If that foreign race god king wanted to hide, no one would be able to find him. When that time came, he would wreak havoc in the Scorpion star zone, killing star lords and god king experts as he pleased. Just as the evil soul god king was filled with worry, a communication jade slip flew into the divine battleship and landed in front of him. This communication jade slip was sent by the flying deer star lord. When the evil soul god king finished reading the contents of the jade slip, he was pleasantly surprised and could not help but laugh. Ha ha ha. The heavens are really looking after me. This is a pleasant surprise. The two guards beside him were puzzled. They asked, "Sir, what has made you so happy?" The evil soul god king was in a good mood. He patiently explained, "In the void hundreds of millions of miles away from the flying deer star, there is an ore star that contains large amounts of resources. The experts of the surrounding stars often gather resources there. The two divine blacksmiths of the flying deer star brought their disciples to the ore star to gather resources. Yesterday, they actually met a foreign race youth who was devouring that ore star. According to their description, that white-robed, black-haired foreign race youth is the person we are looking for." The two guards came to a sudden realization. They hurriedly bowed and said, "Congratulations, Domain Lord. The heavens are looking after you, sir. They have sent that scoundrel to you for you to slaughter." The evil soul god king laughed a few more times before he waved his hand and ordered, "Pass down my order. There is no need to rest. Go straight to that ore star. I want to see that foreign race youth within 5 days." The two guards acknowledged the order and quickly left the secret room to pass down the order. Only the evil soul god king was left in the secret chamber. He muttered to himself, "The blue scorpion god king had planted many spies in the distant star. Although I've gotten rid of a few hundred of them, it's hard to avoid some that slipped through the net. Perhaps the blue scorpion god king already knows that I have left the distant star with my troops. With his personality, he will definitely not let go of this opportunity. He will either ambush the distant star or bring many experts to kill me. If he ambushes the distant star, he will definitely kill Lei Ming. This is also good. I can use his hands to get rid of a thorn in my side. If he comes to kill me, haha, I have already found the foreign race youth. I will be able to kill him within 5 days. By the time the blue scorpion god king arrives, it will already be too late. Perhaps I can even set up a trap and take the opportunity to kill him." Chapter 39-35. At the same time, Blue Scorpion Godly King, 48 godly kings, and 3,000 godly monarchs drove 2 godly ships toward Flying Deer Planet. At first, their target was Yocheong Star. Blue Scorpion God King's initial report was that Evil Soul God King was leading many experts toward Yocheong Star. However, 10 days ago, Blue Scorpion God King and the others arrived at Yocheong Star. They waited there for 2 days but did not see Evil Soul God King. Some generals suggested that they continue to wait for Evil Soul God King on Yocheong Star and set up an ambush. However, after careful consideration, Blue Scorpion God King decided to leave Yocheong Star. He and many other generals believed that Evil Soul God King was still on the way and might be near Flying Deer Star. They would definitely pass by that golden ore star on the way from Yocheong Star to Flying Deer Star. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 5 days, Ji Tianxing had been casting spells on the ore star and devouring stars. The ore star was shrinking every day, and his strength was increasing. Fortunately, these few days were very peaceful, and no one disturbed him. However, he did not know that in the void not far from the Ore Star, a ferocious-looking evil soul worship was quietly approaching. Although evil soul God King knew Ji Tianqing's whereabouts and was confident that he could kill him, he was still worried. But in these 5 days, he had been very worried, anxious, and urgent. He wanted to reach the Ore Star immediately and kill the alien God King. However, he was afraid that the alien God King would sense the danger and leave the Ore Star to hide. If that happened, he would have made a wasted trip again. He didn't know when he would be able to find traces of the alien God Kings. At this moment, the Ore Star was right in front of the evil soul worship. Now that they were very close to the Ore Star, evil soul God King's heart was in his mouth. He was going to personally carry out God King Changfeng's mission. Whether he could succeed or not depended on today. God King Evil Soul had the divine worship slow down in order to not expose their tracks and disturb the alien God King so that the alien God King could escape. Furthermore, the divine worship's flashing divine light was also retracted. It became very low-key and hidden. After reaching the Ore Star, the divine worship flew past the surface of the Ore Star, searching for the alien God King. According to the Flying Deer Star Master's report, the foreign race's godly king had set up a powerful formation while devouring the stars. There was a dazzling white light net with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles, as well as 2 huge white light vortexes, which were very eye-catching. With such obvious markings and features, it should be easy to find, right? What's more, this Ore Star is obviously much smaller than before. With that in mind, God King Evil Soul ordered everyone to prepare for battle. Very soon, the 35 God Kings and 1,000 God Lords finished their cultivation. They were all in high spirits as they waited for orders. Several hours later, the Evil Soul battleship had searched half of the mineral star and was heading to the other side. After flying for 2 hours, God King Evil Soul and company could clearly see that the surface of the planet in front of them was indeed emitting a white light. From a distance, he could only see a hazy white light and 2 tiny spots of light. When the divine ship flew for another 2 hours and was very close to the white light, everyone could finally see it clearly. That white light was indeed a huge net with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. It was formed by billions of white light beams that extended from the ground to the stars. As for the 2 spots of light, they were 2 white light vortexes with a radius of nearly 5,000 miles. When the divine ship was tens of thousands of miles away from the white light vortexes, God King Evil Soul and many of the generals saw a foreign race youth in white robes casting an art. It's him. He's still here. At this moment, God King Evil Soul was overjoyed. He could barely contain his excitement. All of his previous worries and apprehensions vanished into thin air. Many God King experts were also filled with joy and excitement. All of them were rubbing their palms together. However, God King Evil Soul's excitement was over. What filled his heart was thick anger and killing intent. Humph! Damn bastard, how dare you be so arrogant? How arrogant! God King Evil Soul was certain that the other party had killed 2 batches of generals under his command and must have guessed that he would come for revenge. Under such circumstances, the other party had already exposed himself, yet he still refused to leave the Ore Star. This meant that the other party did not take him seriously at all. The divine ship was currently speeding towards that white-robed youth. God King Evil Soul looked at the agitated generals in the hall and exhorted, "Everyone, act according to the situation. You must be more careful. That foreign race God King is very arrogant. His strength can't be underestimated either." Everyone nodded their heads to express their understanding. But nobody took these words to heart. After all, they had more than 30 God Kings and close to 1,000 high-ranked divine lords. While the other party only had 1 person. Even if the other party was a peak God King, being besieged by so many of them, he was also dead without a doubt. Swoosh! A moment later, the divine ship rushed to the vicinity of the white light vortexes and stopped 100 miles away from the white-robed youth. After the divine ship's cabin door opened, God King Evil Soul and the many generals who were on standby immediately charged out. Swoosh! 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 Only God King Evil Soul led his 4 trusted God Kings and walked towards that white-robed youth. The other 30+ God Kings and 1,000 Divine Lord experts all spread out, forming a massive encirclement. Within a few breaths, the encirclement was formed, trapping the white-robed youth within. At the same time, the white-robed youth also stopped casting and put away the 2 streaks of white light vortexes. What was different from before was that this time, he even put away the heaven-mending bead. He stood on the surface of the star empty-handed, looking up at God King Evil Soul and the rest, his gaze calm and indifferent. Those 1,000 divine lords and 30+ God Kings in the surroundings, he did not take them seriously. God King Evil Soul exchanged glances with him. Just sizing him up once, thick vigilance welled up in his heart. Because the white-robed youth's aura was restrained, making him completely unable to sense divine power undulations. This kind of situation, there were only 2 possibilities. Either the white-robed youth was a mortal without divine power, or he was a peak powerhouse whose strength was much stronger than his. God King Evil Soul knew that the other party naturally would not be immortal. Then there was only one possibility left, the other party was a peak God King. Even though God King Evil Soul had long been mentally prepared for this. But when he confirmed that the other party was a peak God King, he still could not help worrying in his heart. After all, he and these soldiers under his command, even if they could kill the other party, they would definitely have to pay a terrible price too. Even though he cherished his life very much, even if the soldiers all died in battle here, it was impossible for him to be killed. But he had no choice but to consider, after this battle, how many soldiers under his command could still survive. Just as God King Evil Soul was secretly pondering, Ji Tianqing took the initiative to speak. If this king didn't guess wrongly, you're the main character, God King Evil Soul, right? God King Evil Soul and the foreign race generals were taken aback when they saw this, their faces filled with confusion. How could this be? Isn't he alone? Damn it! He actually brought so many helpers with him. In the previous few battles, he was alone. Why did he summon so many helpers today? It seems like he felt that the previous few battles were easy and that he could finish them alone. Today, we outnumber him, so he can only summon helpers. No matter how many helpers he has, he will definitely die today. Everyone was discussing through voice transmissions. They didn't panic at all and were still aggressive. Without waiting for Yun Yao, Ji Ku and the rest to get into formation, more than 30 divine kings of the foreign races took the lead and launched an attack. Nearly 1,000 divine lords of the foreign races also joined forces to release towering divine fire and sword shadows to attack Ji Tianqing and the rest. Seeing the overwhelming sword shadows pouring down, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out endless golden light, forming a huge defensive light shield. Boom! 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 The sky full of divine skill light slammed onto the defensive light shield, creating a deafening sound. However, the golden light shield didn't budge and wasn't damaged at all. Everyone's attacks were neutralized. Taking advantage of this short period of time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Feng and the rest had already joined forces to form a battle formation. Bai Feng, Yun Yao and the rest of the 9 divine kings were stronger. They took the lead to attack the surrounding divine kings and engaged in an intense battle. With Bai Long leading the 9 peak divine lords, they formed a battle formation in the inner circle and joined forces to fend off the attacks of the foreign race experts. At the same time, they counterattacked the divine lords of the foreign races. As for Ji Tianqing, he had already flown into the void. With the sword of burial of heaven in hand, he began his massacre. God-slaying sword. Sword of Burial of Heaven. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Sword of Daytime. Sky-piercing Finger. Ji Tianqing used his left hand to perform palm techniques, fist techniques and finger techniques while his right hand swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He used all kinds of sword Dao techniques. His target was the God King Evil Soul and the 30-odd God King experts. Divine King Evil Soul wasn't in a hurry to take action. He wanted to observe the battle between the soldiers and Ji Tianqing before launching a sneak attack at the right time. He didn't expect Ji Tianqing to lock onto his Divine Soul aura and use his strongest killing move on him. Seeing the sky-piercing finger coming at him, he instinctively raised his arms to block in front of him. His body emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky and condensed into a barrier. Ji Tianqing revealed a playful sneer when he saw Yi Futian perform such a divine ability. Moreover, the divine ability and divine power were rather special. Bam! Following a dull explosion, Divine King Evil Soul's bloody light barrier was shattered into pieces on the spot. His left arm was pierced through by the finger and he flew out in a sorry state. As for the 4 high-level Divine Kings beside him, they were struck by Ji Tianqing's Sword Dao technique. They exploded into a bloody mist and their bodies collapsed. These 7th and 8th stage high-level Divine Kings couldn't even withstand one move from him and their divine bodies were destroyed. The bloody mist scattered and miserable cries were heard. A few divine sparks retreated in a panic. Although Divine King Evil Soul was still around, they couldn't care less as they fled into the void desperately. At the same time, Ji Tianqing used a few more divine abilities to shatter the godheads from thousands of miles away. Swish! Divine King Evil Soul was about to counterattack when he had already teleported thousands of miles away and collected all the divine sparks that scattered across the sky. Immediately after, Ji Tianqing waved his sword and slashed out a few thousand feet long sword lights into the encirclement of the foreign race divine lords. Following a few loud bangs, more than 100 high-level divine lords were sliced into pieces by the sword lights. There was a gap in the encirclement. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the rest took the opportunity to break out. They killed a bunch of high-level divine lords and continued to fight with the foreign race divine kings. Ji Tianqing controlled the entire battlefield and forced Divine King Evil Soul to retreat. At the same time, he kept killing Divine King experts one after another. An intense battle unfolded on the Ore Star. As time passed, everyone kept moving further away, causing the battlefield to become wider and wider. It almost reached a radius of 100,000 miles. As everyone fought, the divine art light projection had already covered a radius of 100,000 miles and kept flashing in the void. When he was fighting with God King Evil Soul and the others, he did not use his full strength. While dealing with 6 to 7 godly kings, he also paid attention to the situation on the battlefield. He diverted some of his attention to protect Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Wushuang, White Dragon, and the others. The purpose of this battle was to hone everyone's skills and not put their lives in danger. If it were ordinary peak divine kings, it was very hard to have the strength to control the entire scene like this. But for Ji Tianqing, it was a piece of cake. Just like that, the battle that was supposed to end in 2 hours was dragged on for 4 hours and still wasn't over. Everyone was enjoying themselves to the fullest, but they still wanted to continue and were not in a hurry to end it. At that moment, 70% of the 1,000 alien race divine lords had been killed. There were only about 300 left. Out of the 35 God King experts, only 16 were left. Moreover, all of them were injured quite badly. God King Evil Soul was also covered in wounds. He was dripping with blood and looked terrible. At this point in the battle, he could already see the outcome of his defeat. Originally, he wanted to escape with the surviving soldiers. However, the soldiers were being held back by Ji Tianqing's friends and relatives. It was impossible for them to escape. In addition, God King Evil Soul realized that Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had used up a lot of their divine power. They seemed to be showing signs of exhaustion. Even Ji Tianqing's strength and methods were not as powerful and terrifying as he had imagined. He seemed to be an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, God King Evil Soul had a glimmer of hope and anticipation. No matter how strong they are, after 4 hours of fighting, they are at the end of their flight. As long as we can hold on for another 2 hours, we might be able to turn the tables. Thinking up to here, God King Evil Soul dismissed the thought of escaping. He resisted and counterattacked seriously and cautiously. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry either. He pestered God King Evil Soul and the few alien race powerhouses while observing the situation of his friends and relatives. He could tell that everyone was fighting to their heart's content. After this battle with the alien race powerhouses, everyone must have gained a lot and comprehended a lot. And he also discovered something extremely interesting in this battle. That was God King Evil Soul. Even though he was wearing a loose black robe and a cloak, covering his original face. His scarlet eyes, the black gas shrouding his entire body, as well as the special blood-light divine ability, all made Ji Tianqing think of a race. Fiend race. That's right. Ji Tianqing saw the shadow of the fiend race on God King Evil Soul. Before today, he always thought that only the 5 elements world had fiends. But looking at it now, this matter did not seem to be that simple. Chapter 39-38. Ji Tianqing had guessed correctly. The people in the 2 divine ships were God King Blue Scorpion and his subordinates. 4 hours ago, the 2 divine warships had passed by nearby. The scouts and several God King generals discovered that the golden or star was flashing with dazzling divine light. When God King Blue Scorpion learned of this, he immediately used his arts to observe. He discovered that the Or star was not only flashing with divine light, but it was also clearly smaller. From the frequency and scene of the divine light flashing, there should be a large number of experts fighting. God King Blue Scorpion immediately decided to have the 2 divine ships conceal their tracks and silently approach the Or star to investigate. Thus, the 2 divine ships concealed their tracks and divine light and quietly approached the Or star. 70,000 miles away from the Or star, the 2 divine ships stopped and hid in the void to observe the battle. It was not just God King Blue Scorpion. More than a dozen God Kings used their divine senses to observe the battle on the Or star. When they saw that one of the groups was God King Evil Soul and his subordinates, they were wild with excitement. Many God King generals praised God King Blue Scorpion's foresight and admired him greatly. Fortunately, they did not have Cheong Xing waiting. Otherwise, they would not have been able to see the battle between God King Evil Soul and his subordinates. Only now did everyone understand that God King Evil Soul had led his elite troops here on a mission. However, on the other side of the battle, the God Kings and God Lords led by Ji Tianqing, they were unfamiliar with them. They racked their brains and pondered for a long time, but they could not figure out who that group was or why they were fighting God King Evil Soul. What was most inconceivable was that God King Evil Soul's side had more people and was clearly stronger overall. But in the end, God King Evil Soul's side suffered heavy casualties, while the foreign experts were not killed. This result shocked everyone. They could only find it hard to believe. Of course, it did not matter who that group was or where they came from. They were able to defeat God King Evil Soul, kill all his subordinates, and capture him. This was worthy of everyone's celebration. I really didn't expect that it was actually a bunch of foreign race experts who helped us defeat the Evil Soul God King. Ha ha ha. The experts under the Evil Soul God King have all been killed, and he has also been captured by that foreign race's God King. His fate is unknown, and our crisis has been resolved. We don't need to do anything to resolve the crisis and obtain the final victory. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens. Speaking of which, that foreign race youth in white robes is really strong. Him beating the Evil Soul Divine King is simply a one-sided slaughter. He's definitely a peak divine king. How strange. There are no peak divine kings in our Scorpio galaxy. Where did that alien youth come from? Many generals were in high spirits as they discussed animatedly. But some people noticed that God King Blue Scorpion's face was rather gloomy, his eyes like ice. If one looked closely, they would discover that there was a hint of anger and shock hidden in the depths of his eyes. Clearly, after Blue Scorpion God King observed for a moment, he recognized that the white-robed youth was precisely Long Yan's brother. Not only was that person a peak divine king, his strength was even more tyrannical than Long Yan's. He couldn't afford to offend such a character. He didn't even want to meet him. He didn't dare guarantee that Ji Tianqing wouldn't kill him after seeing him. Thus, after the battle on the Ore Star ended, he ordered the two divine ships to immediately turn around and leave. He had already seen Ji Tianqing capture the evil-souled divine king with his own eyes. No matter what grudges they had, the evil-souled divine king would not have a good end now that things had developed to this stage. Next, he had to return to the front lines and lead the soldiers in a counterattack, using this opportunity to defeat the evil-souled divine king. Not only did he have to reclaim the lost land, but he also had to seize the evil-souled divine king's territory and completely occupy the Scorpio galaxy. Although the soldiers were somewhat puzzled by his orders, they immediately carried them out. But at this moment, a divine soul voice transmission rang out in God King Blue Scorpion's mind. "Since you're here, don't leave. This king has something to say." This familiar voice caused God King Blue Scorpion's body to tremble, his expression turning extremely ugly. "It's over. He's already discovered me. I shouldn't have been so close to the Ore Star, and I shouldn't have watched the battle for so long." God King Blue Scorpion knew that this was bad. His mind immediately tensed, and he instinctively wanted to speed up and flee. However, his divine sense detected that Ji Tianqing had already left the Ore Star and was traversing the void in pursuit of the divine ships. His opponent was even faster than the divine ships and would catch up in a few seconds. God King Blue Scorpion was in complete despair. He knew that it was too late to run now. Since he could not hide, he could only brace himself and face it. After all, Ji Tianqing's tone was calm, as if he had no intention of killing him. "Stop." Thus, God King Blue Scorpion immediately made the decision to order the two divine ships to stop. The officers controlling the divine ships were somewhat confused, not understanding what God King Blue Scorpion wanted to do. But as God King Blue Scorpion's loyal officers, they carried out the order without hesitation. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the two divine ships stopped and floated in the void. At this moment, the Blue Scorpion God King warned the generals, "Everyone, stay in the ship and don't come out. I'm going to see that expert. Just wait for my orders." With that, the Blue Scorpion God King opened the cabin door of the divine ship and stepped into the void, flying toward Ji Tianqing. The officers on the ship were all dumbfounded, not understanding what God King Blue Scorpion was up to. Many people were worried for him. They all took out their divine weapons and maintained their vigilance. The moment something went wrong, they would rush out of the ship to rescue the Blue Scorpion God King. At the same time, Ji Tianqing and the Blue Scorpion God King met in the void. The Blue Scorpion God King stole a glance at Ji Tianqing. After confirming that there was no killing intent in his eyes, he bowed and said, "Blue Scorpion greets Senior." Although he didn't know what Ji Tianqing's intentions were. However, he felt that Ji Tianqing was not an evil person, so he was taking a gamble. He gambled that the other party wouldn't kill him, so he treated him with courtesy. As the saying went, one doesn't slap a smiling face. Since he was so polite, the other party probably wouldn't attack him. Ji Tianqing sized up the Blue Scorpion God King, his lips curling into a playful smile. "You seem to have become much smarter in half a year." The Blue Scorpion God King didn't know how to respond. He could only remain silent and stand obediently. At this moment, Ji Tianqing reached into the divine pagoda and pulled out the heavily injured God King Evil Soul, who was on the verge of death. He held the God King Evil Soul in his hand and asked the Blue Scorpion God King, "I heard that the two of you started a war over the position of Star Field Master." The Blue Scorpion God King hurriedly bowed and answered truthfully, "That's right. God King Evil Soul started the war and sent an army to invade my territory, slaughtering countless people. Fortunately, I received Senior's help today to quell this war." The God King Evil Soul wasn't unconscious. Seeing Ji Tianqing and the Blue Scorpion God King talking, he was filled with grief and indignation. The two of them really do know each other. This guy is Blue Scorpion's helper. He didn't admit it before. Chapter 39-39. God King Evil Soul was both furious and helpless. He was certain that Ji Tianqing was God King Blue Scorpion's helper. But he had already been defeated and captured by Ji Tianqing. His life and death were beyond his control, and he was powerless to resist. At this time, God King Blue Scorpion was also trying to figure out Ji Tianqing's intentions. He defeated God King Evil Soul and asked us about the Domain Lord position. Could it be that he wants to take control of the Scorpion Star Zone and become its master? Both sides had their own agendas. Ji Tianqing said to God King Blue Scorpion, "I've already killed God King Evil Soul's subordinates. Now that I've captured him, this war should be over. You can launch a counterattack, seize his territory, and take control of the entire Scorpion Star Zone. That shouldn't be a problem, right?" God King Blue Scorpion was very surprised that Ji Tianqing would help him. But on second thought, he understood Ji Tianqing's intentions. He immediately bowed and said excitedly, "Many thanks for Senior's help. Blue Scorpion is eternally grateful. Once Blue Scorpion returns to the front lines, I'll lead a counterattack and take control of the entire Scorpion Star Zone in 10 years at most. However, Blue Scorpion is weak and doesn't have the right to control it. Only a powerhouse like you is qualified to sit on the seat of the Master of the Star Field. This junior is willing to be your right-hand man and be at your beck and call. I'll be absolutely loyal." God King Blue Scorpion was very smart. He knew that the other party had the ambition to dominate the Scorpion Star Zone. If he dared fight for the position of Domain Lord, only death would await him. Since that was the case, he would throw in his lot with Ji Tianqing and become his lackey and henchman. Even if Ji Tianqing wanted him to be a puppet region master, he wouldn't have any complaints. The reason why Ji Tianqing asked Blue Scorpion God King to stay was precisely because of this. He had been considering how to search the entire Scorpion Star Zone in a short time and find clues about his master's death. It would take him at least 1,000 years to search all the stars on his own. However, if he supported the Blue Scorpion God King to become the master of the star field and had the Blue Scorpion God King send people to search for clues, it would be much more convenient. Naturally, he wouldn't stay in the Scorpio Star Zone for long, nor did he care about the position of Star Zone Lord. Therefore, he would let Blue Scorpion Divine King be a puppet and temporarily take over the position of Region Master. You are indeed very sensible." Seeing that the Blue Scorpion God King had taken the initiative to submit, Ji Tianqing nodded in satisfaction. After confirming Ji Tianqing's intentions and thoughts, the Blue Scorpion Divine King heaved a sigh of relief. He once again bowed in delight and began to flatter Ji Tianqing. Seeing his groveling appearance, the Evil Soul God King sneered disdainfully, Blue Scorpion, you're still used to being someone else's lackey. Truly unbearably lowly. If I hadn't met this fellow, how could someone like you be worthy of being my opponent?" The Blue Scorpion God King was humiliated in front of his face, so he was naturally enraged. He subconsciously retaliated. "God King Evil Soul, you laugh at me for being a lackey, but aren't you also someone else's lackey? If not for you defecting to God King Longwind and having a peak Divine King as your backer, would you be worthy of vying for the position of Region Master with me?" "Bullshit. The evil soul God King flew into a rage and said with a heart full of resentment, "This seat only submitted in name. He has always been serving Lord Supreme and doesn't move about the Scorpio star zone at all. These few years, have you ever seen him intervene in our great battle? If God King Longwind personally took action in this great battle, would this seat lose? If God King Longwind personally came here, the ones kneeling and begging for mercy right now would be you guys. Ha ha ha. You're truly delusional." The Blue Scorpion Divine King mocked mercilessly, "Your backer, God King Longwind, is nothing compared to Senior Long Tian." The two overlords mocked and cursed at each other. But Ji Tianqing heard some useful information from the evil soul God King's words. He immediately raised his palm and interrupted the two divine kings' quarrel. "God King Evil Soul, what's the background of your backer, God King Longwind? Also, you said earlier that God King Longwind is serving Lord Supreme? What Supreme? Which Supreme?" Ji Tianqing stared at the evil soul God King and asked in a solemn tone. The evil soul God King smiled coldly and said, "You're called Long Tian, right? If this seat didn't guess wrongly, you should be a peak divine king from the dragon realm." "Ho ho. My backer, God King Longwind, is a peak divine king from the divine world. Furthermore, behind him, there's even Lord Supreme. That's a supreme powerhouse who far surpasses peak divine kings. Long Tian, Lord Supreme and God King Longwind both chose this seat as the Scorpio Region Master. If you dare to kill me and dare to snatch the position of Region Master, that's becoming enemies with Lord Supreme. This seat advises you to think thrice before you act." Presently, the evil soul God King wanted to preserve his life and could only bring out his backer to threaten Ji Tianqing, hoping that Ji Tianqing would back off in the face of difficulties. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, seeming to be more and more interested. He turned his head to look at Blue Scorpion God King and asked, "Is what he said true?" Blue Scorpion God King's expression was somewhat hesitant, afraid that Ji Tianqing would be frightened and really let the evil soul God King go. But he did not dare to say false words to deceive Ji Tianqing and could only nod his head and say, "There's indeed such a thing. However, that God King Longwind rarely shows his face and virtually doesn't interfere with the Scorpio region's matters. As for that Lord Supreme, it's just hearsay and rumors. Nobody has seen before with their own eyes." Blue Scorpion God King was tactfully persuading Ji Tianqing not to be frightened by the evil soul God King. The evil soul God King immediately panicked and said in a certain tone, "Bullshit. Blue Scorpion, you don't understand the situation at all, don't talk nonsense. God King Longwind will reach the distant star within a month. After this seat becomes the Scorpio region lord, I'll be able to see Lord Supreme with my own eyes." After refuting Blue Scorpion God King, he said to Ji Tianqing again, "Long Tian, if you let me go today and don't interfere with my struggle with Blue Scorpion anymore, I can take it as if this matter never happened. You rest assured, God King Longwind and Lord Supreme won't pursue the matter with you either. But if you persist in having your own way, even if you kill me, you'll also infuriate Lord Supreme. You have to consider the consequences yourself." Hearing these words, Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a cold smile full of coldness on his face. He lifted the evil soul God King and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Evil soul, since this king captured you, I never thought of letting you go. You don't understand this king's nature at all. A threat like yours is completely useless to this king. Furthermore, this king just happens to want to meet that God King Longwind, as well as Lord Supreme behind him." Seeing his firm attitude, Blue Scorpion God King heaved a sigh in relief once more. The large rock hanging in his heart finally landed. But the evil soul God King was filled with anxiety and hurriedly roared angrily, "Long Tian, if you dare to kill me, you'll definitely regret it. God King Longwind will arrive very soon. At that time, he'll definitely take revenge for me." Really noisy. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows. His right hand fired out a stream of divine soul power, smacking into the evil Soul God King's head. Immediately, the evil Soul God King's 2 eyes rolled back, and he fell unconscious. Ji Tianqing put him away into the 9 heavens 10 absolute pagoda and suppressed him in the 2nd level space. Following that, he took out another jade slip and said to Blue Scorpion God King, "You're a smart person. You should know what you need to do when this king supports you to be the region lord." Chapter 39-40. The Blue Scorpion God King naturally understood. The other party wanted him to be the master of a star zone, but he was only a puppet. And as a puppet, he had to be absolutely loyal. He originally thought that Ji Tianqing would give him some kind of poison pill or use some kind of ability to threaten and control him. But when he saw the jade slip in Ji Tianqing's hand, he recalled the oath the Golden Crow Patriarch had been forced to swear. The Blue Scorpion God King's body trembled, and he asked bitterly, "Senior Long Tian, must I swear that oath?" "Of course." Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "You are very smart, but you are also someone who goes with the wind and has no loyalty to speak of. In order for this king to trust you, you can only swear a heavenly oath. Compared to using poison pills or abilities to control you, this king still believes in the power of the heavens more." The Blue Scorpion God King immediately fell silent, his expression and eyes filled with helplessness. He knew that in this situation, he could only accept without any room to resist. If he dared to refuse, Ji Tianqing would most likely kill him and support someone else to become the master of a star zone. In any case, the master of a star zone was just a puppet, and any high-level God King could take the position. After hesitating for a while, the Blue Scorpion God King could only nod and say, "Fine, I accept." Then, he received the jade slip from Ji Tianqing with both hands and read its contents with his divine sense. The jade slip recorded the heavenly oath Ji Tianqing had prepared long ago, and there were nearly 1,000 words on it. The Blue Scorpion God King carefully read it and found that this heavenly oath was very strict, down to every word. He took a few deep breaths before reciting in a low voice, "Today, I, Blue Scorpion, swear to the heavens. From today onwards, I swear loyalty to Long Tian of the Dragon Realm and temporarily take over the position of Master of Scorpion Star Zone. I will do my best and will not dare to slack off. First, I will be absolutely loyal to Long Tian at all times. I will not have the slightest disobedience and obey any of Long Tian's orders. Otherwise, Blue Scorpion will suffer the wrath of the heavens and be annihilated by divine lightning. Blue Scorpion's relatives and friends would also be punished by the heavens. Secondly, no matter when or where, you must unconditionally protect Long Tian's interests. You must not allow Long Tian's interests and reputation to be damaged, and you must not harbor any resentment." In Blue Scorpion God King's view, this heavenly Tao oath was extremely detailed and long-winded. It was so long-winded that every single detail and every single possibility was strictly limited. The more God King Blue Scorpion read, the more humiliated and indignant he felt. He even wanted to cry. At this moment, he finally understood how painful it was for the Golden Crow clan leader to be forced to swear an oath to the heavenly Tao. Now, he'd followed in the footsteps of the Sun Crow Patriarch and made such a detestable oath to the Tao of the heavens to completely restrict himself. Soon, he was halfway through the heavenly Tao oath. Countless strands of divine light appeared around the Blue Scorpion God King, and there was also a mystical Taoist rhyme above his head. In the depths of the void, muffled sounds of thunder could be heard. It was as if the heavenly Tao was chanting. 100 breaths later, the Blue Scorpion Divine King finally braced himself and finished reciting the heavenly Tao oath. At this moment, the divine light and Taoist rhyme around him bloomed like a blazing sun, becoming dazzling and resplendent. He could clearly sense that the heavens had already accepted this oath and were responding to it. And he had completely become Ji Tianqing's loyal lackey, the kind that did not dare to disobey or offend. The divine light that filled the sky gradually dissipated, and the Taoist rhyme also became thin and transparent. The Blue Scorpion God King looked like he had nothing left to live for. He absent-mindedly held the jade slip and returned it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip with a smile, then took out several dozen communication jade slips and handed them to him. "All right, you've made a wise choice. As long as you work loyally for this king, not only will your life not be in danger, but you will also enjoy glory and wealth. This king will help you deal with the most troublesome enemies, but you will have to take back the territory yourself. Take these communication jade slips. If there are any important matters, you must report to this king and ask for instructions." The Blue Scorpion God King took the jade slips and bowed respectfully. "I will follow your majesty's orders. If your majesty has no other instructions, then this subordinate will take his leave." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Go ahead." The Blue Scorpion God King bowed and was about to leave. But he was still a little worried and could not help but ask, "Your Majesty, how will you deal with the evil soul God King? This subordinate wants to remind you that you must not be deceived by him, and you must not let the tiger return to the mountain." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "Does this king need you to teach me how to do things? What, have you forgotten the oath you just made to the heavenly Tao? This subordinate dares not, Your Majesty, please calm down." The Blue Scorpion God King was shocked and hurriedly bowed and apologized. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent him away. After the Blue Scorpion God King left, he turned and flew back to the Ore Star to continue devouring stars. On the other side, the Blue Scorpion God King returned to the divine ship under the watchful eyes of thousands of soldiers. The moment he entered the divine ship, those nervous and vigilant God King generals immediately surrounded him. "Alliance Master, are you all right? Lord Alliance Master, what were you discussing with that white-robed youth just now? Is that white-robed youth a peak God King? Are you friends with him? Alliance Master, we saw divine light radiating from your body just now, and there was also a mysterious power. Did that expert give you pointers?" Everyone was puzzled and asked the Blue Scorpion God King at once, eager to find out more. The Blue Scorpion God King naturally would not tell the truth. Otherwise, his dignified image would instantly crumble. He suppressed his disappointment and humiliation and pretended to be dignified and happy. He said proudly, "That expert just now was a peak God King from the Dragon Realm, Senior Long Tian. He is my good friend and senior. This time, he specially came to the Scorpion Galaxy to help us eliminate the evil Soul God King. Now that he has captured the evil Soul God King, we will return to the front lines and prepare to lead the army to launch a counterattack." When the generals heard this, they were elated and cheered excitedly. However, there were also a few experienced generals who asked worriedly, "Alliance Master, is that Senior Long Tian really just here to help? When we take over the evil Soul God King's territory and control the Scorpion Galaxy, you should be the governor, right? That Senior Long Tian probably won't snatch the position of governor, right?" What these generals were most afraid of was that the position of governor would be snatched away by someone else after they had risked their lives to fight for it. The Blue Scorpion God King understood their thoughts. He immediately patted his chest and said with a smile, "Senior Long Tian is an expert. Why would he be interested in the position of governor? Everyone, don't worry. Senior Long Tian has already told me that I will be the governor. He will not stay in the Scorpion Galaxy for long. He will only be our backer in the dark." Everyone's doubts were dispelled. They were all excited and eager to return to the front lines immediately to lead the army to launch a counterattack. Chapter 39-41. Before long, the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being and his subordinates disappeared into the void. Although Ji Tianqing had never attacked him, Ji Tianqing had never attacked him. Once he saw Ji Tianqing, he felt fear and respect from the bottom of his heart. He did not want to stay by his side for a moment longer. Because he knew that Ji Tianqing was also a peak divine king, but he was far more terrifying than the Golden Crow Patriarch and Long Yen. Furthermore, when facing this mysterious expert, he could forget about playing tricks. That would be showing off his slight skill in front of an expert and seeking his own death. Especially when he had already sworn a heavenly Tao oath. It could be said that his life and death were in Ji Tianqing's hands. Now, he could only follow Ji Tianqing's arrangements and return to lead his troops to counterattack and occupy the Scorpion Star Zone as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing returned to the Ore Star and took out the heaven-mending pearl, allowing the divine pearl to continue devouring stars. He was not in a hurry to use the devouring divine ability. Instead, he took out the heavily injured Evil Soul Divine King and threw him on the ground. Evil Soul Divine King was still unconscious as he laid on the ground. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing waved his hand and fired out a wisp of golden light that entered Evil Soul Divine King's head. Evil Soul Divine King immediately woke up and stared at Ji Tianqing with vigilance. Long Tian, what are you trying to do? Evil Soul Divine King was very alert. He looked around and realized that Blue Scorpion Divine King was not present. On the desolate and cold Ore Star, there was only him and Ji Tianqing. And Ji Tianqing had not killed him until now. He saw the hope of survival and thought that Ji Tianqing wanted to negotiate with him. Blue Scorpion Divine King is not present. Speak, what conditions do you want for you to let me go? Ji Tianqing looked down at him from above and said with a cold smile, you think that this king did not kill you and kept you alive to negotiate with you? Do you think that this king is afraid of the backer behind you? Am I not? Evil Soul Divine King asked back. Ji Tianqing sneered again and said, now that your life is in the hands of this king can't be bothered to talk nonsense with you. The reason why I didn't kill you is because I still have a few questions to ask. The Evil Soul God King's eyes lit up as hope ignited in his heart. He hurriedly asked, then after I answer your question, can you let me go? He. How could it be that simple? Ji Tianqing smiled and asked in a deep voice, tell me everything you know about God King Everlasting Wind and that Supreme. God King Evil Soul was silent, the flames of anger and humiliation flickering in his scarlet eyes. A moment later, he asked in a deep voice, what if I refuse to answer? Are you going to kill me? Ha! If that's the case, don't even think about getting any news about them. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said with a disdainful tone, you've probably forgotten one thing. Even if I kill you, I can still use the soul-searching technique to refine your soul and memories. At that time, why would I need to go through the trouble of interrogating you? God King Evil Soul's body instantly stiffened. The last trace of hope in his heart was also shattered. Not only was his life in the hands of Ji Tianqing, he did not even have the slightest bit of initiative now. There was no hope of turning the tables. However, there was still a trace of stubbornness in his heart. He asked in a deep voice, then what are you waiting for? Aren't you going to kill me? Ji Tianqing's expression was still indifferent as he said, if you're bent on dying, this king can of course fulfill your wish. However, this king has long seen that your desire to live is very strong, so I'm giving you one last chance. Don't waste time, it's time for you to make your choice. God King Evil Soul completely abandoned any thoughts of luck and could only answer truthfully, I haven't met God King Everlasting Wind many times. I only know that he comes from the God realm and works for Lord Supreme. A few hundred years ago, he came to the Scorpio Star region to find me and said that he would support me to become the region lord. However, I wanted to be a puppet region lord and listen to all his instructions and arrangements. I naturally disdained to meet him and fought with him. However, I lost miserably in less than 10 moves. God King Evil Soul recounted the process of how he got to know God King Everlasting Wind to Ji Tianqing. God King Everlasting Wind had always appeared and disappeared mysteriously, his whereabouts erratic. He would come to the Scorpio Star region roughly once every 100 years. And each time he came, he would bring away massive amounts of cultivation resources and urge God King Evil Soul to unify the entire star region as soon as possible. In these few hundred years, the cultivation resources that God King Evil Soul plundered for him were worth more than $1 trillion. But even so, God King Everlasting Wind was still unsatisfied and would often reprimand God King Evil Soul. As for the supreme behind God King Everlasting Wind, God King Evil Soul had never seen him before and only heard of him a few times. He could roughly determine that the supreme also came from the God realm. Furthermore, his realm surpassed God King. Apart from this, there was no other information or clues. Ji Tianqing had long guessed that the supreme was one of the 5 great God emperors. But God King Evil Soul's status was too low and could not find out more information at all, making him rather disappointed. This king remembered that you said previously that God King Everlasting Wind is currently on the way back to Distant Star, right? Ji Tianqing asked. God King Evil Soul nodded. Ji Tianqing asked again, then he should know that you brought many experts to come and kill this king. God King Evil Soul nodded again. Very good. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a meaningful smile, immediately send him a message asking for help and have him come here to save you. God King Evil Soul was stunned for a moment and immediately guessed his intentions. He immediately growled in astonishment, are you crazy? You want to lure him here and set up a trap to kill him? Why not? Ji Tianqing raised his brows. God King Evil Soul said with a cold smile, he's a peak God King. Furthermore, each time he comes to the Scorpio Star region, there are 6 God King realm guards by his side. All of them are high-ranking God Kings. Long Tian, don't blame me for not warning you. You're courting death. God King Evil Soul was naturally not worried that Ji Tianqing would be killed. He was just unwilling to do so, in case God King Everlasting Wind settled scores with him, supporting someone else to become the region lord while he became an abandoned child. Ji Tianqing saw through his thoughts and said with a contemptuous tone, in your eyes, God King Everlasting Wind and his 6 guards might be unattainable experts. But in this king's eyes, it's merely a small problem that can be resolved in an instant. Remember, this king is not bargaining with you. This is an order. Since it was an order, God King Evil Soul naturally knew the outcome of disobeying an order. He silently took out a special transmission jade slip and asked God King Everlasting Wind for help. Even though this was him being forced to put on an act, deliberately luring God King Everlasting Wind here. But this was also a realistic portrayal of his current situation. Therefore, his voice and tone were very natural. Even the content of his request for help did not need to bother to fabricate, just saying it as it was would do. Of course, he did not reveal that he was captured by Ji Tianqing. He only said that he was heavily injured and that the soldiers under his command also suffered heavy casualties, which was why he was able to injure Ji Tianqing. Currently, he was on the run, hiding from Ji Tianqing's pursuit and hiding on the firmament star. He hoped that God King Everlasting Wind would hurry over to save him, kill the foreign race God King, and quell the chaos in the Scorpio Star region. Chapter 39-42. After God King Evil Soul finished speaking and was about to send out the communication jade slip, Ji Tianqing stopped him. The firmament star you speak of, which star is it in the vicinity? God King Evil Soul pointed to the northwest, a star about 200 million miles away. That star was not considered big, but there were living beings living there. However, there were very few high God King experts. Ji Tianqing nodded, only then did he tacitly allow God King Evil Soul to send out the message. Whoosh! The communication jade simplified into a stream of light, disappearing into the pitch-black void. God King Evil Soul hurriedly said to Ji Tianqing, logically speaking, God King Changfeng should be arriving at the distant star soon. If he receives my message and immediately rushes over to help, he will probably arrive in a month. You still have a month's time, you can set up a trap on the firmament star in advance. Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing was somewhat surprised and asked, God King Evil Soul, aren't you the candidate that God King Changfeng supported as the domain lord? Logically speaking, you should be hoping that he comes to kill this king. Why are you helping this king to come up with a plan? God King Evil Soul's eyes were somewhat gloomy as he said in a deep voice, although God King Changfeng is my backer, he did not give me any practical help. Even if I defeated God King Blue Scorpion and occupied the Scorpion Star Zone, that was my contribution. Yet, he was stronger and wanted to be above me, making me a puppet domain lord. He only knew how to take, desperately squeezing the resources of the Scorpion Star Zone. How can I not hate such a bastard? If you can kill him, it might be a good thing for me. Ji Tianqing smiled, just these reasons. I'm afraid it's not enough, right? God King Evil Soul knew that he could not hide it from him and continued, since he can make me the domain lord, he can naturally support others. Therefore, to him, I'm nothing more than an abandoned pawn that can be abandoned at a crucial moment. If he could help me like how you helped God King Blue Scorpion, the Scorpion Star Zone would have long been under my control. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing asked again, you cherish your life very much and are quite shrewd. Naturally, you know how to survive. I'm very curious. Why don't you beg me to let you replace the Blue Scorpion Divine King and support you to become the Region Master? In any case, you've already said that no matter who supports you as the governor, you're just a puppet. God King Evil Soul sneered and said, at the beginning, I indeed had this thought. After all, you don't seem to have a very close relationship with the Blue Scorpion God King. However, I am even more aware that even if you can defeat God King Eternal Wind, it is ultimately impossible for you to defeat that sovereign. As long as that supreme martial artist makes a move, you will definitely die. If I were to side with you, I would be killed by that sovereign sooner or later. Ji Tianqing immediately understood. He chuckled and said, so, you are feigning civility with this king just to save your life temporarily. You don't want to rely on me because you don't want to offend that sovereign. That's the only way you can stay alive. After this king and the Blue Scorpion Divine King are killed by that supreme being, you will be able to live until the end and still be the domain lord, right? God King Evil Soul remained silent. It could be considered a tacit admission. Ji Tianqing said with a playful smile, I have to say, only a fence-sitter like you who swings with the wind can possibly live until the end. But unfortunately, you are destined to be disappointed after encountering me. Seeing him so confident, God King Evil Soul sneered inwardly but did not open his mouth to argue. Because he knew that angering Ji Tianqing now would not do him any good. The two were silent for a while. Ji Tianqing opened his mouth again and asked, God King Evil Soul, where are you from? You shouldn't be born in the distant star, right? God King Evil Soul revealed a puzzled look and asked, why are you suddenly asking this? Could it be that you want to investigate my background? That's right. Ji Tianqing admitted frankly. God King Evil Soul was even more puzzled. He sneered and said, I'm just a minor character that you can casually kill. What's there to investigate? Ji Tianqing looked at him and said in a low voice, although there are countless foreign races in the Scorpion Star Zone with all kinds of appearances and attire, you still have to look at them. Using a black robe and black mist to cover your body and face with a cloak is still a little strange. If I'm not wrong, your true body should be as black as ink and covered in scales. You also have a pair of sharp claws. Also, your spine can't be straightened and has grown several bone spurs. If you don't use your divine power to suppress them, those bone spurs will pierce your body and grow 2 bone wings on your back. Am I right? Ji Tianqing observed God King Evil Soul's expression as he spoke. God King Evil Soul was currently very weak. The cloak and black mist used to cover his face could no longer block Ji Tianqing's probing. His blood-stained face immediately revealed a look of shock. A trace of fear flashed across his scarlet eyes. This was his greatest secret, the truth that he had tried his best to hide for nearly 10,000 years. He had never expected that Ji Tianqing, who he had only met once, would be right. You. Who are you? God King Evil Soul naturally wouldn't admit it, but his vigilance toward Ji Tianqing was instantly raised to the highest level. Ji Tianqing didn't answer his question. He continued asking, "Do you have parents, relatives, or children? Where are they now? Does he have the same appearance as you? Also, your race shouldn't be common in the Scorpion Star Zone, right?" God King Evil Soul was truly panicking. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried his best to analyze Ji Tianqing's background and intentions. At this moment, he was truly terrified. He only wanted to leave and escape. However, he was severely injured, his divine power sealed, and Ji Tianqing had placed restrictions on his body. He couldn't move at all. Faced with Ji Tianqing's aggressive questioning, his mind was in a mess. He didn't know how to answer. He could only close his eyes and say in a low voice, "I don't know what you're talking about. Also, I don't have children. Everyone in the Scorpion Star Zone knows that I only have one adopted son, Marshal Lei Ming." Ji Tianqing wasn't in a hurry. He said with a smile, "You don't have children because you don't dare to have physical contact with others. You're afraid that your secret will be exposed. Oh right, I just thought of something else. Before you became a god, when you were still weak, your race's bloodline gave you great power, but it also brought you great pain. Every night when there was a full moon and stars shone brightly, you couldn't suppress the surging power in your body. Your body would swell, twist, and change shape. You were in so much pain that you wished you were dead. Only after you became a god and could absorb the power of the stars and divine power could you be free of that pain." Ji Tianqing's tone was neither fast nor slow. He was very confident and steady. God King Evil Soul's heart was trembling. He finally couldn't hold it in anymore and couldn't hide it anymore. "Who are you? How do you know all this?" Ji Tianqing smiled faintly and said, "Your race is known as the demons. It's a cruel, bloodthirsty, and cold-blooded race. It's also a race cursed by the heavens. Of course, you're now a God King expert. Therefore, you're not just a demon, you're also one of the best, a demon god." Chapter 39-43. When Ji Tianqing said this last sentence, Divine King Evil Soul's psychological line of defense was utterly crushed. He was unable to believe that Ji Tianqing understood the fiend race very well. Unlike the foreign race powerhouses in the various major star regions, they had never even heard of the fiend race, let alone understand. For over 10,000 years, Divine King Evil Soul did his best to conceal this fact, afraid that it would be discovered by anyone. The worry, terror, and anxiety in his heart caused his suspicious, cold-blooded, and emotionless nature. He did not dare to trust anyone, let alone reveal his secret. In order to not be noticed by others, he did not even dare to say the word fiend for so many years. But today, in front of Ji Tianqing, he was like a transparent person without any secrets. At this moment, he was filled with fear, his entire body powerless as he sprawled on the ground, panting violently. "Divine King Evil Soul, don't you think we should have a good talk?" Ji Tianqing looked down at him, the corners of his mouth curling into a hint of a cold smile. "Oh right, almost forgot to tell you something. I was once called the Fiend Slayer by the world. The fiends that were slaughtered by me number as many as several million." Ji Tianqing's words were like a sharp blade, ruthlessly stabbing into Divine King Evil Soul's heart. Also like a sledgehammer, fiercely pounding on his divine soul. His eyes opened wide in anger, roaring in fury and shock, "This is impossible. I spent over 3,000 years, searching through the 9 major star regions, and only found 10 odd fiend race bloodlines. The so-called fiend race, no one in this world knows about it anymore. I also collected and consulted countless ancient texts before finding some information about this race. How can you possibly know so much? How can you possibly slaughter several million fiends? How can there be so many fiend citizens for you to slaughter?" Ji Tianqing was slightly pleasantly surprised, asking with a grin, "Oh. You already searched through the 9 major star regions and only found 10 odd fiends. When did this happen? Where are those 10 odd fiends now? Divine King Evil Soul answered weakly, just as you said, they were all cursed by heaven. When I found them, it was 10,000 years ago. But in the 2,000 years after that, they died one after another one. Right now, I'm probably the only demon left in this world. Pausing for a moment, he asked in a deep voice, where did you find millions of demons? Was it the dragon realm or the god realm? I've searched through all 9 major starfields, but the dragon realm and the god realm are the only ones I haven't visited yet. Ji Tianqing shook his head, and said, it's not the dragon realm, nor is it the god realm, but the lower realm. Slaughtering millions of demons was something I did before I ascended. Lower realm? God King Evil Soul was stunned. Remaining silent and pondering for a long while, he murmured to himself, millions of devil people, why are they in the lower world? Could it be that none of them can become gods and ascend to this place? Ji Tianqing said with an indifferent tone, the devil race in the lower realm is also cursed by the heavens. They are destined to be unable to become gods and ascend. Tell me, what clues have you found after investigating so many ancient books? Do you know the origin of the demon race? Do you know why the demon race was cursed by the heavens? Actually, Ji Tianqing vaguely knew a little. It should be related to the ancient Great War 30,000 years ago. For example, the mother of the human race, goddess Yaoguang, sacrificed herself in order to suppress the demon race. Even the 5 elements world was very likely destroyed during that period and fell into the lower realm. As for the origin of the demon race, as well as what role the demon race played in the ancient Great War, he was not very clear either. Therefore, that was why he would interrogate God King Evil Soul, hoping to add some clues. But very unfortunately, God King Evil Soul laughed coldly, full of pride, and said, ha 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 ha. Demon Slayer? You want to know the secret of our demon race? Right now, I'm the last demon in this world, you don't dare to kill me. If you kill me, you can forget about knowing the secret of the demon race. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to open his mouth to refute, he said again in a deep voice, don't use refining divine soul memories to threaten me. The clues and information that I can remember are just an extremely small portion. Many of the ancient books and clues that I found are all stored in some top secret place. As long as I die, you can forget about ever finding them. Ji Tianqing shot him a glance and said with a light laugh, hoo hoo. You suddenly found where your value lies and feel that your little life is saved. Don't forget, whether I kill you or not, it all depends on this king's mood. Even if this king doesn't kill you, there are also myriad ways to make you wish you were dead. God King Evil Soul was not afraid and was even somewhat disapproving as he said with a cold smile, hoo hoo, as a fiend cursed by heaven, what kind of pain have I not tasted before? Still scared of your threats? Ji Tianqing could not be bothered to bicker with him either and said in a calm tone, forget it, saying all this is useless nonsense. This king wants to investigate the origin of the demon race and some secrets. Don't you want to figure out these too? Relax, before finding the answer to the riddle, this king won't kill you. You just stay in the darkness obediently and calm down properly. Finished talking, he reached his hand out and fired out a ray of golden light again, knocking God King Evil Soul unconscious. Swoosh! He put God King Evil Soul away into the 9 heavens 10 absolute pagoda again and suppressed him in the 3rd level space. That level space was not big. There was only boundless darkness and a wasteland, cold and deathly still. After dealing with God King Evil Soul, Ji Tianqing continued casting spells to devour Ore stars. Half a month later, the Ore star gradually disappeared under his and the heaven-mending pearls devouring. Ji Tianqing obtained massive amounts of divine power, and his strength increased further. The heaven-mending pearl and 5 elements world also obtained boundless divine power replenishment. At present, the 5 elements world was currently experiencing a spiritual energy revival. It would probably continue for many years. And the heaven-mending pearl's power had also recovered to king-level superior-grade divine artifact long ago. Ji Tianqing put away the heaven-mending pearl and left contentedly, flying towards the firmament star not far away. Of course, he would not set up many traps on the firmament star. With God King Longwind's strength, as long as he was careful, he would definitely detect the abnormality and perceive the danger. Hence, after Ji Tianqing descended on the firmament star, he only surveyed the map and terrain of the star. He also chose 2 places to be the battlefield and buried some things in advance as a foreshadowing for the great battle. This move was not because he was afraid of God King Longwind and the 6 guards, but just in case. After Ji Tianqing finished setting up, only then could he ensure that nothing went wrong. Even if God King Longwind brought several thousand divine lords to attack, Ji Tianqing could also deal with it calmly. After setting up the battlefield, Ji Tianqing concealed himself on the firmament star and silently waited for God King Longwind's arrival. He maintained an invisible state and sat in a vast expanse of white cloud sea. He meditated in peace and paid attention to the movements in the void. Below the cloud sea was a steep mountain peak that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and as straight as a giant sword. This was the first battlefield that Ji Tianqing chose. Unknowingly, another half a month passed. This evening, when the sun was setting in the west, the target finally appeared. Ji Tianqing also opened his eyes and ended his meditation. Chapter 39-44. Ji Tianqing sat at the peak of the Sea of Clouds as he sensed the abnormality in the starry sky. Kacha kacha. Following the crisp sound, a wide crack appeared in the sky. Firmament Star's space barrier was torn apart and a 3,000 feet long battleship which looked like a dragon eagle passed through the crack and entered Firmament Star. Although Ji Tianqing was 100,000 miles away from that battleship and he could not see the battleship's appearance clearly. But he could sense that the battleship was emitting a vigorous and majestic god power aura, like a huge beast which could split the heavens and earth as it barged into Firmament Star. That battleship's grade was very high, it was a king-grade upper-grade god artifact and there were many powerful god arrays inscribed on it. Generally speaking, only peak god kings would possess such a powerful battleship. Ji Tianqing was still worried that God King Changfeng would be more cautious and sneak into Firmament Star silently. In that case, he would be in a passive position and it would be hard for him to find a chance to attack God King Changfeng. But from the looks of it, God King Changfeng had swaggered into Firmament Star, obviously looking down on him. This was not only because God King Changfeng was confident in his ability, it was also because God King Evil Soul did not state Ji Tianqing's ability realm when he sent out the distress signal. In God King Changfeng's understanding, he was merely a 9th stage realm foreign race God King who was causing trouble in Scorpio Star region. And God King Evil Soul's incompetence and failure to kill that foreign race God King was within his expectations. After all, he knew that God King Evil Soul harbored resentment and his ability was weaker. God King Changfeng was not surprised by such a situation. Swoosh! In a blink of an eye, that Dragon Eagle battleship passed through the crack and entered Firmament Star. The battleship floated high in the sky and did not act rashly. At this moment, in the battleship's cockpit, there was a god race man dressed in golden armor with 4 golden wings on his back. He was looking down at Firmament Star expressionlessly. He had the typical characteristics of a god race man. He was over 10 feet tall and had a burly build. The 4 golden wings on his back were as tough and powerful as an eagle's wings with smooth lines. He had a head full of golden hair and his dark brown eyes revealed a cold and imposing aura. Without a doubt, this golden armor man was God King Changfeng. A peak divine king expert from the divine world. Send a message to the Evil Soul Deity King. Tell him that I have arrived at the Firmament Star. Tell him to report his location. God King Changfeng placed his hands behind his back as he gave the order expressionlessly. Behind him, there were 6 high god kings standing in the spacious room. Without exception, these 6 people were from God Realm's God clan and their powers were around 7th and 8th stage realm. These 6 God Kings were the personal guards of God King Eternal Wind that God King Evil Soul had mentioned. They were also God King Eternal Wind's most trusted aides. One of them acknowledged the order and immediately took out a communication jade slip to send a message to Deity King Evil Soul. After sending the message, everyone fell silent, quietly waiting for the Evil Soul God King's reply. However, the Evil Soul God King was currently being suppressed by Ji Tianqing in the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and was still unconscious. That communication jade letter flew in front of Ji Tianqing, but was unable to enter the Divine Pagoda, so Evil Soul Divine King was naturally unable to receive it. God King Changfeng waited for around a quarter of an hour and didn't see any reply from Evil Soul God King, so he started to get anxious. This incompetent bastard. Didn't he say that he was hiding in the firmament star to recuperate? Why hasn't he replied to my message till now? He can't even handle such a small matter and even made me take action personally. After this matter is over, I will definitely cripple him. This incompetent and disobedient fellow has no right to be the domain lord. Evidently, God King Changfeng was extremely dissatisfied with Evil Soul God King's performance and already had the intention to support him to be the domain lord. The 6 God King realm guards all nodded their heads to express their agreement. My lord is right. Many years ago, this subordinate could tell that Evil Soul God King had ulterior motives and harbored resentment towards my lord. What my lord needs is an obedient puppet, not an incompetent but ambitious piece of trash. My lord, this subordinate thinks that Evil Soul God King's foster son Lei Ming might be a good candidate. This lad's ability is not inferior to Evil Soul God King, but he is easier to tame and control. Just as the few guards were remonstrating, God King Changfeng suddenly frowned as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Head forward and rush to that mountain. God King Changfeng pointed to the vast sea of clouds below as he looked at the faintly discernible mountain peak in the sea of clouds. The 6 guards did not understand the meaning, but the God King controlling the divine worship still carried out the order without hesitation. After the divine worship rushed to that mountain peak at lightning speed, God King Changfeng opened his mouth and said, "Just now, I saw a flash of blood light on that mountain peak. That's a special light and energy fluctuation that would only appear when Evil Soul God King cast a divine art. He should be on that mountain peak, but I wonder what he's up to." God King Changfeng also knew that Evil Soul God King's divine art and divine power were very special and had very obvious signs. Therefore, he only needed a glance at the blood light that flashed across the sea of clouds and sensed a wisp of divine power fluctuation to ascertain that it was Evil Soul God King casting a divine art. The few guards were not as confident as him and were somewhat worried as they all opened their mouths to warn him. "Your Excellency, please be careful and be wary of any tricks." "Your Excellency, could it be that Evil Soul God King was attacked by foreign race experts and they are currently fighting there? What if Evil Soul God King betrays us and sets a trap there to ambush us?" These 6 people were not only God King Changfeng's guards but also his strategists and think tanks. They naturally considered things more comprehensively. However, God King Changfeng did not take it to heart at all as he sneered contemptuously, "I believe that Evil Soul God King has the thoughts and guts to betray us, but he doesn't have the strength. Ignoring the fact that he ambushes me, even if he joins forces with foreign race experts to set up an ambush, it's also courting death. If he really dares to betray us, then I don't even need to find an excuse. I'll just cripple him." As they conversed, the divine worship traversed hundreds of thousands of miles of sea of clouds and arrived at the brown mountain peak. This mountain peak hidden in the sea of clouds was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and spanned 1,000 miles. The mountain peak's terrain was relatively flat and spanned dozens of miles like a massive platform. The divine worship floated above the platform. God King Changfeng led the 6 God King guards out of the divine worship. Swoosh! 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 7 people appeared in the sky. The 6 guards immediately drew their swords and sabers and spread out, surveying the surrounding situation vigilantly. God King Changfeng's hands were empty as he stood proudly above the sea of clouds. Looking at the empty mountain peak, he frowned. It was only to see that the mountain peak was completely silent. There was not even a shadow. Forget about any traps or ambushes, even evil soul God King was nowhere to be seen. God King Changfeng's brows were locked tightly as he released his divine sense to extend into the surroundings to investigate the situation inside the mountain peak. The 6 guards became increasingly vigilant. Someone warned with a voice transmission, "Your Excellency, the situation is somewhat strange. We have to be careful." Before this person finished speaking, a golden light that soared into the sky suddenly lit up in the sea of clouds around the mountain peak. There was no doubt that his internal organs and veins were crushed by that cold light. His god body died on the spot. Swish! A golden, diamond-shaped godhood flew out from the top of his head. The God King's guard fell from the sky, into the sea of clouds. His godhead was at a loss, and it subconsciously fled into the distance, trying to get as far away from this mountain as possible. As for Divine King Changfeng and the other 5 guards, their faces were filled with shock and astonishment as they cried out in alarm. The 5 guards had no idea who had ambushed their comrade and destroyed his divine body in an instant. Only Divine King Changfeng could tell that the blazing white light was actually a sword beam. Only peak Divine Kings proficient in sword Dao could possess such horrifying lethality. That was right. Only peak Divine Kings could do it. It was impossible for a 9th stage realm God King like Divine King Evil Soul to accomplish it. After the cold light disappeared, the surroundings were still silent. No one appeared. But the 5 God King's guards were shrouded in rage and fear. They did not dare to disperse, and they all closed in on Divine King Changfeng, gathering around him. Who is it? To be so despicable, to ambush us secretly. Sneaky bastard, come out if you have the guts and fight us face to face. Divine King Evil Soul, you damned beast, we're going to grind your bones to dust. The 5 guards roared and cursed furiously. Divine King Changfeng remained silent, but his expression was extremely grim. His eyes shone with a cold light. He understood that things were not that simple. This trap was designed by a peak Divine King. The real killing move was probably still behind. However, what Divine King Changfeng was worried about did not happen. Other than the golden light grand array's power continuing to increasing the pressure on the 5 God King's guards, there was no follow-up attack. This was also because the 5 guards surrounded Divine King Changfeng, guarding the surroundings with extreme vigilance. Even a heaven-class assassin like Ji Tianqing could not find a chance to strike. Therefore, he appeared on the mountain peak that was shrouded in clouds. Swoosh! A white light flickered, and a dragon race youth in white robes appeared on the mountain peak, looking at everyone expressionlessly. Instantly, Divine King Changfeng and the 5 guards' attention was attracted by him. You're the one who ambushed us. Damned bastard, you're not from Scorpio Star region, you're from the dragon race. I understand now, you're the foreign race's Divine King that Evil Soul mentioned. Despicable and shameless beast, Divine King Evil Soul betrayed us, and you actually joined forces with him to ambush us. The 5 guards were knowledgeable, and in a blink of an eye, they recognized Ji Tianqing's identity and background, and guessed that he was in cahoots with Divine King Evil Soul. Divine King Changfeng looked indifferent, but he was extremely vigilant. He stared at Ji Tianqing silently. After sizing him up for a moment, he made a judgment in his heart. Indeed of the dragon race, peak Divine King strength. Looks like your strength realm is on par with mine, but your strength foundation is a little weaker. No wonder Divine King Evil Soul and the Divine Kings under his command were all defeated. Based on their strength and methods, they can't deal with a peak Divine King. Seeing Ji Tianqing's background clearly, Divine King Changfeng was much calmer in his heart and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, there was only the other party here and no one else. Just a peak Divine King, then it was easy to handle. Divine King Changfeng regained his dignity and confidence. Staring at Ji Tianqing, he said with a cold smile, "Brat, if this seat didn't guess wrongly, you defeated Divine King Evil Soul and captured him." Divine King Evil Soul craved for life and was afraid of death, so under your coercion, he sent a message to this seat for help. It's just that this seat doesn't understand, where did your confidence come from, to actually dare to set up a trap here and ambush this seat? Divine King Changfeng was not in a hurry to kill the other party. He wanted to sound out the other party's background first, whether or not he still had any backup moves or other helpers. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing said with a contemptuous look, "Dealing with the few of you, this king alone is enough. This heavenly scorpion star region, this king wants it. You all can go and die already." Finished talking, he actually did not give Divine King Changfeng the chance to probe again, directly brandishing his sword and charging over. Swoosh! 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 His left hand executed the Dragon Elephant Divine Fist, while his right hand executed the Shattering Sun Sword, taking the initiative to attack Divine King Changfeng and the 5 guards. Divine King Changfeng gave a contemptuous smile. He did not even take out his weapon and was about to swing his fist to meet the attack. The 5 guards were also filled with righteous indignation, brandishing their sabers and swords with all their might, using their ultimate divine abilities and launching a counterattack. Soon, a dazzling divine light illuminated a radius of 20,000 miles. Both parties were about to unleash a ferocious clash and kill immediately. But right at this time, something that everyone did not expect happened. 3,000 miles behind them, 3 identical Ji Tianqing appeared out of thin air, brandishing their swords at the same time, slashing towards that divine ship. Chapter 39-46. The attention of God King Changfeng and the 5 guards was focused on the Ji Tianqing on the mountain peak. They never expected that there would be 3 Ji Tianqing a few thousand kilometers behind them. Not only were their appearances and auras identical, even their strength, cultivation realm, and divine soul auras were identical. At this moment, God King Changfeng and the 5 guards turned pale with fright as they revealed expressions of deep indignation. These are his clones. Quick, protect the divine worship. You damned bastard, you're too despicable. Everyone cursed angrily as their hearts leaped to their throats. Unfortunately, everything happened in an instant. It was too late for them to stop it. Bam! 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 The sky was filled with divine arts as they collided, producing a series of dull thuds. The divine arts executed by number 1 Ji Tianqing were all neutralized by God King Changfeng and the 5 guards. Neither side gained the upper hand. At the same time, the other 3 Ji Tianqing had already brandished their swords and executed arts, ruthlessly cleaving the gigantic divine worship. Boom! Amidst a deafening boom, the divine worship floating in the sky was drowned by sword light and divine arts. The divine power barrier on the surface of the divine worship was shattered on the spot as countless fragments of light splattered. The incomparably hard outer shell of the divine worship was also cleaved by the burial of heaven, creating a 1,000-foot-long gash as countless fragments splattered out. Without a doubt, these 3 Ji Tianqing were not all clones. 2 of them were clones while 1 was Ji Tianqing's main body. It was also Ji Tianqing's main body that used the burial of heaven to cleave the divine worship apart. Whoosh! Hundreds of gods of outsider races fell out of the wide opening like dumplings being dropped into a pot. There were also countless divine stones, ores, pills, and divine artifacts that poured down like floodwaters, scattering into the vast sea of clouds. These foreign race gods came from different stellar domains and were divided into different races. They were all at the heavenly god realm, but they were sealed and unable to use their divine power. They were no different from mortals. As for the cultivation resources, they were of a lower grade and were of a variety of types. They seemed to have been plundered from the various star fields. The reason why Ji Tianqing had ambushed the divine worship was because he was worried that there would be a large number of experts hidden in the divine worship. However, he did not expect that God King Changfeng's divine ship would actually contain tens of thousands of foreign race heavenly gods and countless cultivation resources. He then recalled that God King Changfeng was working for a certain god emperor, and that the 5 great god emperors were carrying out some unknown plan in the depths of the void. Therefore, he guessed that these things were all plundered by God King Changfeng in preparation to gift to that god emperor. In the blink of an eye, God King Changfeng and the 5 guards reacted. They no longer cared about Ji Tianqing's avatar and pounced towards the divine worship without regard for anything else, wanting to protect the resources and the foreign race gods in the divine worship. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone rushed over, Ji Tianqing brandished the burial of heaven again and slashed out several thousand feet long sword lights, cleaving at the gash in the divine worship. At the same time, 6 avatars appeared out of thin air in the sky. A total of 9 avatars joined forces to intercept God King Changfeng and the 5 guards. The 6 of them were blocked and surrounded by the 9 avatars, unable to break through. After all, Ji Tianqing's 9 avatars each had half his strength. Strictly speaking, the combat strength of each avatar was on par with God King Changfeng. Of course, this was under the condition that God King Changfeng did not use a supreme-grade divine artifact. Bam! 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 Divine light splattered all over the sky as deafening booms exploded one after another. God King Changfeng and the 5 guards were blocked. Even if they risked their lives to break through, it was to no avail. They could only watch helplessly as Ji Tianqing's main body continuously brandished his sword, chopping that divine worship into pieces, breaking it into 3 pieces. Ah! Save me! The shattered remains of the divine worship fell from high in the sky, smashing into the vast sea of clouds. Among them, divine stones, metals, weapons, and other resources sprayed out all over the sky. It even flung out countless foreign race celestial gods. They were like disorderly fragments, spiraling high in the sky before falling into the sea of clouds. Of course, there were also 100 high-ranked divine lords in the divine worship. They were God King Changfeng's guards. When the divine worship was attacked, they also rose up to resist and retaliate. But their resistance was so weak that it was not worth mentioning compared to Ji Tianqing's ferocious attacks. After the divine worship was shattered, they also fled the divine worship one after another, scattering high in the sky. Ji Tianqing was simple and crude. Brandishing his sword, he pointed it at the firmament and roared furiously, "Sword rain!" Immediately, tens of thousands of starry swords appeared in the firmament, pouring down like a meteor shower. With the 100,000 feet tall mountain as the center, a radius of 20,000 miles was covered by the starry swords. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth-shaking loud noise lasted for a long time before dissipating. Under the bombardment of the tens of thousands of starry swords, the 100,000 feet tall mountain was leveled to the ground, turning into dust and dirt that filled the sky. The resources and more than 30,000 foreign race celestial gods that poured out of the divine worship were also blasted into dregs by the starry swords. Even those 100 high-ranked divine lords could not escape the fate of being pulverized into smithereens. In fact, the 5 high-ranked divine king guards were also injured by Ji Tianqing's clones. Blasted by the sky full of swords, their divine bodies were destroyed one after another. About 100 breaths of time later, the clamorous battlefield gradually calmed down. God King Changfeng's worship was destroyed. The Divine Lord Guards were also completely wiped out. Even 3 of those 5 Divine King Realm Guards were killed. Even their divine sparks turned into fragments. The remaining 2 divine sparks, in addition to the initial divine spark, all fled in front of God King Changfeng and burrowed into his sleeves. They could not escape the sealing grand array and could only hide by God King Changfeng's side. It was the safest. On the battlefield, only Ji Tianqing and God King Changfeng were left. No, there were still Ji Tianqing's 9 clones. Counting it this way, there should be 10 Ji Tianqing surrounding God King Changfeng. The atmosphere was very solemn and austere. God King Changfeng's expression and eyes were as cold as ice, filled with venomous resentment. Punk, who the hell are you? Why do you want to oppose this seat? God King Changfeng's plan was foiled and he suffered heavy losses. He knew that it was hard to end well today. He was definitely going to suffer this loss. However, he had a supreme-grade king-level divine artifact and reckoned that escaping was not difficult. But before he escaped, he had to figure out the other party's background so that he could take revenge in the future. This king has said it long ago. This king wants to control the Scorpio star zone. Since you want to snatch territory, then this king will kill you. Ji Tianqing held the sword of burial of heaven in a reverse grip and looked at God King Changfeng expressionlessly, replying in an indifferent tone. Humph. God King Changfeng naturally did not believe such nonsense. He insisted that Ji Tianqing definitely had other schemes. This king has some understanding of the Dragon Realm situation. But according to what this king knows, there is no such person like you among the 5 great dragon emperors of the Dragon Realm. Speak, who the hell are you? Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a faint smile and said, given your status, you are not qualified to know. Don't waste time. Wait until this king captures you, then we can chat slowly. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.